Per decenni, la polizia americana ha inseguito un'ombra. Un uomo che attraversava gli Stati Uniti, lasciando dietro di sé una scia di morti che nessuno collegava tra loro. Non perché mancassero le prove, ma perché nessuno stava guardando il quadro completo. Il suo nome è Samuel Little e secondo l'FBI è il serial killer più prolifico della storia degli Stati Uniti. Samuel Little nasce nel 1940 in Ohio. La sua infanzia è instabile, segnata da continui spostamenti e difficoltà sociali. Non emerge subito come criminale violento, ma il suo nome appare nei registri di arresto già da giovane età. Furto, aggressioni, crimini minori. Nulla che, all'epoca, suggerisca la portata futura della sua attività. Eppure, dietro questa superficie, si sviluppa un pattern. Un individuo mobile, invisibile nei contesti urbani, senza legami stabili. Un profilo che, col tempo, diventerà perfetto per evitare attenzione investigativa.
Combined horrors of Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and Jeffrey Dahmer, whose crimes have shocked the nation. Little traveled from state to state, leaving a trail of victims behind. He often left their bodies exposed, showing no concern for evidence or capture.
I seen a motel and a road leading up to the motel. And there's a lot of bushes and brushes beside the road before you got to that motel. That's where I pulled up her body out and rolled it down.
So, how was Samuel Little able to commit so many murders without being caught?
Who the hell was doing it? Yeah. I don't go back to the same city sometimes and pluck me another grape. I said, how many grapes? Y'all got on the vine here. Ooh, sure. That one right over.
There's a good one, yeah.
Before his final arrest, Little had been taken into custody nearly 100 times. Yet he managed to avoid justice repeatedly, spending only a total of 10 years behind bars. How did he escape suspicion? And more importantly, how did the system fail so many of his victims?
I was lucky in Florida. I had a dead body in the car. That would get the choked out. Police car and come back behind the building. He seen us parked there. I jumped out the car and tried to act like I was zipping my pants. He said, oh, what the fuck? What's going on over here? I said, nothing. I said, me and my wife just got in the courts. Put the damn car, looked in that window with a flashlight, I'm telling you. Shining right on the girl. She lay up there like that.
And she's dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
And as soon as he was looking in there, I said, yeah, right here. I tried to get his mind off of her. Just in the nick of time before he took a second look. And I got away like that. He said, well, you got to get out of him. Wow. I got in the car and took off.
The police failed to investigate Little thoroughly or build a strong case against him, as he knew how to avoid leaving substantial evidence behind.
Even though he had 100 arrests and served only 10 years prison time, I would blame partially the criminal justice system because a lot of the cases against him were dismissed, they weren't followed up with, and he was fleeing constantly. He was very transient and leaving to different areas, cities across the nation.
But what turned Samuel Little into America's most prolific serial killer? Could it have been his unimaginable relationship with his mother, leaving lasting psychological scars? Or was it a dark fixation, an obsession with women's necks that fueled his killing spree?
I got attracted to
The neck part. Yeah. So you pick them out by the way that their neck looks, because if the neck looks good, then it might be somebody that you want to have sex with or somebody that you might want to kill. What's the thought?
He's a sadistic killer for sure. He wanted to feel like their neck swallowing. And I think his foreplay, basically, he would take a lot of them to eat, and they would go eat and swallow and drink. And I think that was his foreplay. That's what got him excited, is watching that neck.
And from here, the documentary unfolds with the harrowing story of one of his survivors.
Seemed like it was just a game to him to like have me go unconscious, come back awake again, and then he'd go back at it again, and he asked me to swallow. He says, "I like it when you swallow."
It was the night of September 27th, 1984, in San Diego, California. A car stopped on 10th Avenue and C Street, an area notorious for trouble. A young woman, 22-year-old Lori Barros, stepped out. She wore a black dress with white polka dots, a red belt, and white heels. She didn't notice the man in a black Ford Thunderbird watching her closely from his car. He had chosen his target. Lori Barros, unaware of his attention, was fighting her own battles. She had recently left her abusive husband and was in the middle of a divorce. Life had been unkind to her, full of mistakes and pain. To survive, she had turned to sex work, a choice she deeply regretted. The money helped her buy drugs, a way to escape her harsh reality. That night, Lori was heading to her dealer's apartment to buy meth, trying to ease her suffering.
Why are you back?
I am back here to face and confront the truth of what happened to me.
Lori walked down 10th Avenue, nearing the block between B Street and A Street. Behind her, the man quietly pulled his car to the curb and stepped out. Lori suddenly stopped in her tracks. She listened carefully, her heart racing. Fear gripped her as she stood still, afraid to turn around. Deep down, she knew someone was following her, and she was right.
Well, he had picked me up and shoved me in his car. He knew exactly where he was going. I could tell because it was very direct, but I remember him driving up, this pretty steep, gravelly dirt road that would be this area, and I was trying to hold back my fear, I remember, as he was driving up there.
Out of nowhere, the man grabbed Lori by her wrist and neck, pulling her roughly toward his black Thunderbird. The car door was open, the keys still in the ignition. Lori fought back with all her strength as he dragged her about 25 feet, but she stayed silent. There was no one around to help, and the dim streetlights offered little comfort. She was alone with her attacker in the dark. Lori knew that screaming might only make things worse. Her only chance was to break free and run. But the man was massive, 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighing 240 pounds. Her struggle was futile. He shoved her into the driver's side of the car, forcing her over to the passenger seat.
He threw me in the back seat of the car. He wanted him to tie my hands up behind my back, and then I was scared. And then he lays my head down and starts strangling me with his hands like this.
The man climbed into the driver's seat, locking Lori in a tight headlock with his right arm, his hand clamped over her mouth, silencing her. With his left hand, he slammed the car door shut and shifted the car into drive, speeding away down 10th Avenue. Later, he would claim that he didn't have to drag Lori to his car, that he had lured her inside with a handful of crumpled $20 bills, just like many of his other victims. The man stopped the car and turned off the engine. He quickly got out, pushed the driver's seat forward, and grabbed Lori by the neck. Without hesitation, he threw her onto the back seat with brutal force. Climbing in after her, he tried to kiss her, but Lori resisted, fighting back.
My natural reaction then was to fight, and it just made him push harder.
Angry, he grabbed her neck with one hand and began choking her. He was so large and she was so small that his single hand was enough to cut off her air. He shoved her down onto the back seat, holding her throat tightly for what felt like an eternity, 60 to 120 seconds, before finally letting go.
It was just a game to him to have me go unconscious, come back awake again.
Struggling to breathe, Lori gasped for air and pleaded with the man, begging him not to hurt her. She promised to do whatever he wanted if he spared her. His chilling reply was, "Trust me, I'm not going to hurt you. I love you." He then lifted her polka dot dress, ripping off her nylon stockings and panties. His frustration grew as the fabric got stuck on her white high heels, but he quickly yanked them free. After pulling off her stockings and underwear, the man forced Lori into a kneeling position on the car floor. Using the stockings, he tightly tied her arms behind her back. He then shoved her back onto the seat, leaving her lying on her hands. Without hesitation, he began choking her again. At one point, he muttered chillingly, "Swallow for me. I love it when you swallow."
He'd go back at it again and he asked me to swallow. He says, "I like it when you swallow." And he'd do it all over again. And I think the last time before I went completely unconscious, I remembered thinking, I'm not going to make it out of this.
The man removed his trousers and tried to force vaginal penetration, but he couldn't perform. Frustrated, he rubbed himself against Lori's body instead. Moments later, he climbed on top of her, forcing her into acts of oral submission. Yet again, he failed to maintain an erection, adding to the unsettling tension in the car. Still unable to perform, the man returned to choking Lori, loosening his grip just enough to keep her conscious. It wasn't until she was weak and barely fighting back that he finally became erect. As Lori drifted closer to unconsciousness, he muttered, "Take some of my breath," and kissed her on the mouth. Then, without hesitation, he tightened his grip and choked her until her head fell to the side, her body going limp. During this violent act, the man reached his climax and paused to recover, lying on top of his motionless victim. The man pulled up his pants and sat on the back seat, next to what he believed was Lori's lifeless body.
And then I remember him pushing me out the door.
At that moment, Lori slowly regained consciousness. There was no sudden gasp or noise, just a quiet, shallow return of her breath. Dazed and half aware, Lori realized the man thought she was dead. Using every ounce of her willpower, she remained still and wisely played dead. After a few tense moments, the man opened the driver's side door and shoved Lori out onto the ground. She landed among rats and garbage at what seemed to be an illegal dump site. Satisfied, the man stepped out to adjust the driver's seat, climbed back into his car, started the engine, and drove off. To him, Lori was nothing more than trash to be discarded. At that moment, Lori slowly regained consciousness. There was no sudden gasp or noise, just a quiet, shallow return of her breath. Dazed and half aware, Lori realized the man thought she was dead. Using every ounce of her willpower, she remained still and wisely played dead. After a few tense moments, the man opened the driver's side door and shoved Lori out onto the ground. She landed among rats and garbage at what seemed to be an illegal dump site. Satisfied, the man stepped out to adjust the driver's seat, climbed back into his car, started the engine, and drove off. To him, Lori was nothing more than trash to be discarded. Lori stayed perfectly still, not daring to move until the sound of the car disappeared into the distance. Slowly, she got to her feet and staggered down a gravel path toward Market Street. Barely holding herself together, she walked until she found a payphone. There, she called a trusted friend who came to pick her up and take her home. Once safe, Lori spent hours curled up in the bathtub, sobbing uncontrollably. To the man, Lori was just another victim, dead, like the 11 others he had killed over the past 9 months. Reflecting on that time later, he chillingly stated, 1984 was a real busy year. This violent streak was not an anomaly. It was part of a horrifying pattern spanning 4 decades, cementing his place as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. Despite the staggering number of his victims, this man remains far less known than infamous names like Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy. His horrifying story is rarely told. 4 decades, 40 years of unchecked brutality. As we'll see, this lack of attention from the media mirrors the neglect shown by law enforcement toward his victims. unvulnerable, marginalized women who were too often overlooked.
You didn't get in out there with them people that would be immediately missed.
Yeah.
And very important to either family or business or somebody.
Yeah, you got pretty good at knowing which ones to
Well,
plug.
I'm not going to go over there in the white neighborhood and pick out the little young teenage girl or like the ladies do.
He knew which women on the lower levels of our society he could actually lure into his car to take to a secluded place, to quickly kill them in the dead of night where nobody could see them, and then to dump their body immediately and get out of Dodge.
Is it surprising that the police paid less attention when the victims were sex workers? Compared to other cases, their murders were treated with far less urgency. Sadly, this pattern repeats itself over and over. When law enforcement values certain lives more than others, the results are devastating. These failures weren't just oversights, they were systemic neglect. Meet Samuel Little, born on June 7, 1940, in the small African-American village of Reynolds, Georgia, with a population of just 817. His story began in pain and rejection. His mother, 16-year-old Bessie Mae Little, became pregnant after a brief teenage romance with 19-year-old Paul McDowell. Tragedy seemed to run in the family. Bessie Mae's own mother had died giving birth to her, and Bessie nearly lost her life bringing Samuel into the world. Bessie Mae gave birth at home, assisted by her grandmother, Josephine Little, who served as the midwife. But Josephine was furious that Bessie had gotten pregnant out of wedlock and reportedly wished the baby would be stillborn. When the child survived, Josephine leaned in close to the crying newborn and allegedly whispered, "I curse you." Adding to the rejection, Josephine refused to allow the baby to be given a name, further marking his entry into a world that seemed to reject him from the start. Even Bessie Mae's feelings toward her newborn son were cold and unkind. Decades later, Samuel would recall his mother telling him she never wanted him. "I was just 16, she said, admitting that she tried to end the pregnancy by tying a rope tightly around her belly with the help of a friend. When that didn't work, she drank turpentine, filling the room with a strong, unbearable smell. Despite her efforts, the child survived and entered the world against all odds, a haunting start to an already troubled life. After Samuel was born, Bessie Mae tried to raise him as best she could despite her young age and difficult circumstances. However, when Samuel was just 6 months old, Josephine threw both mother and child out of the house. Her command was cold and unyielding. Bessie Mae was not welcome back until she had gotten rid of the child. She offered no guidance or options, leaving Bessie Mae and Samuel to face an uncertain and unforgiving world. Samuel's father, Paul McDowell, had impregnated Bessie Mae during a cruel contest with a friend to see how many girls they could seduce. He had no interest in the baby, leaving Bessie Mae in a desperate situation. Samuel later recounted his mother's story. "She told me it was raining and she didn't know where to go. She held me close under her breast and wandered through the rain, soaked and exhausted. After hours of aimless walking around the village and nearby countryside, Bessie Mae finally collapsed onto a dirt road, cold and defeated. Clutching her baby tightly, Bessie Mae crawled under a nearby house, raised on stilts to protect against flooding. Exhausted, she fell asleep there. A few hours later, she woke up, still weary, and stumbled back toward the road. In an act of despair, she placed the infant in the mud and walked away, heading back to her grandmother's house. She left Samuel behind, his tiny life hanging by a thread. And about an hour later, a small cart pulled by a goat creaked along the road, stopping near the abandoned infant. The cart's owner, a man named Quint, was a peddler who sold various goods in the village. Quint, who had no legs, lowered himself from the cart and used his knuckles to crawl toward the baby. In a small village like Reynolds, it didn't take long for him to realize the child belonged to Bessie Mae and who the father was. Concluding that the child had been deliberately abandoned, Quint decided there was no point in returning him to Bessie Mae. Quint gently lifted the baby into his cart, used his arms to climb back aboard, and set off toward the home of Paul McDowell's parents, Fanny and Henry. When he arrived, Quint explained what had happened. Thankfully, Fanny and Henry welcomed the baby with open hearts. They quickly took to the child, naming him Samuel and calling him a blessing from God, despite the circumstances of his birth. Paul McDowell wanted no part in raising the child. Shortly after Samuel's birth, he enlisted in one of the segregated units of the U.S. Army, seeking to escape the poverty of village life. This left Samuel, often called Sam by Henry McDowell, to be raised by his paternal grandparents. In December 1941, with the U.S. entering World War II, Henry saw an opportunity to leave Georgia. In 1942, he moved to Ohio in search of factory work that the war effort had made available. By 1944, after 2 years of working in a steel factory, Henry had saved enough money to bring his wife Fanny and grandson Sam to join him. The family settled in Lorain, Ohio, in a modest home on 33rd Street, a predominantly white middle-class neighborhood. To avoid judgment, Fanny and Henry told their neighbors that Sam was their youngest son. When Paul McDowell returned from the war in 1945, he pretended to be Sam's older brother. After returning from the war, Paul married a woman named Betty and went on to have 7 children over the next decade. Meanwhile, other members of the McDowell family moved from Georgia to Ohio, hoping for better economic opportunities. Sam was raised to believe that Fanny and Henry were his real parents, a lie that shaped much of his childhood. Although his grandparents were loving, they were also neglectful. They often failed to monitor his whereabouts and sometimes even forgot to feed him regular meals. According to Sam, when he was 5 years old, he was molested by an uncle who bribed him money in exchange for fellatio. At age 18, Sam wandered into the town in the evening with a little handcart, quietly lifting the hoods of people's cars, removing the car batteries, and selling them at the dump for 75 cents apiece. Also at the age of 8, Sam became infatuated with the little redhead girl in his class named Carol Messenger. According to Sam, he got a wreck thinking about her. Meanwhile, Sam took notice of his teacher, Mrs. Harris. In particular, Sam grew fascinated with how she'd occasionally adjust her scarf and touch her long, elegant neck.
I remember going to school in Lorain, but I noticed that when I was in school, 4 or 5 years old, the teachers met. She turned me on, made me think hard.
Sam was something of a class clown, didn't do very well with his grades, and was often teased by the other students, particularly the girls. Oftentimes, the girls would pick on him, and so Sam would tease them back. But it was Sam, not the girls, who would always get into trouble.
I speak with his family. They ask me all the time, how did this happen? Why? Early childhood, sexual abuse, physical abuse. He went to reform school for stealing a bicycle. It's called Boys Industrial School in Ohio. His family will also tell me he was nothing but trouble even before he went there. Then he just got abused and abused and abused.
Sam reports that even from an early age, he felt a sort of erotic frustration from this. To quote him, "I grew up different from most kids my age. My grandma didn't really watch over me. I just ran the street. I would go to school with dirty, raggedy clothes. And I was ashamed for them girls to see me. They would all laugh at me. I wanted to hold them and feel them, their hair, and touch them. But they didn't want me. My dick got hard. And I knew then that something was wrong with me. Desires became drives. I'd be looking at a woman's throat. The older I got, the stronger the sensation. A lot of my childhood was really mixed up with females. I loved them so much, but I was hurt by a lot of things that they did. A lot of disappointment. By 1950, when Sam was 10 years old, his fetishization of women's necks developed a sadomasochistic component. He would buy detective comics and grow aroused illustrations that depicted men choking women, a frequent enough occurrence in the 10-cent trash produced in those days. Sam was drawn to these violent comic images because the stories often portrayed women as unfaithful or defiant. The plots would feature them being killed in jealous rages, strangled by rejected lovers, or attacked by villains they despised. These recurring themes resonated with Sam, combining his feelings of sexual frustration, rejection, and inadequacy. In his mind, the violence offered a disturbing sense of control and domination, a way to assert power over the women who had hurt or rejected him. It wasn't long before Sam started masturbating to the idea of doing that to a woman, but for many years he only considered it a secret fantasy, rather than something he planned to enact in real life. In the spring of 1953, when Sam was 12 years old, he and two other boys named Jimmy and Billy hopped on a train and ran away to the college town of Oberlin. Soon after arriving, the three boys stole some bicycles parked in front of a lecture hall. A local gas station attendant saw them, called the cops, and within 10 minutes of taking the bikes, Sam, Jimmy, and Billy were arrested. After being convicted of theft, young Sam was sent to the Ohio Boys Industrial School, located 5 miles south of Lancaster. This reform school was designed to instill discipline in troubled youth through a strict military-style routine. Boys grew their own food, made their own clothes, and received vocational training in various fields, such as carpentry, farming, tailoring, and even stenography. The goal was to turn these boys into productive members of society, but the harsh environment left lasting scars on many, including Sam. The Ohio Boys Industrial School had once housed notable figures, including mid-century comedian Bob Hope, who later became a donor to the institution. Sam arrived there in February 1954. His release depended on earning enough merit points for good behavior, meaning his stay was indefinite. The dormitories were strictly segregated by race, and punishment was a regular part of life. Flogging was common, and the harsh disciplinary methods left a deep impact on many young boys, including Sam. There were also more creative punishments, like being forced to stand in the corner, shackled with a ball and chain. You had to hold a 30-pound iron ball in your hands for 10 to 30 minutes. If you dropped the ball, you had to start the time all over again. Occasionally, teachers would beat the kids, purposefully forcing them to drop the ball and restarting the clock. Because the boys' industrial school operated like a sort of open-air prison, without the presence of girls, it became common for the older and stronger boys to sodomize the younger and weaker ones. As Sam later described, the abuse at the school was relentless. When they came for you, it wasn't just one, he said. It was a whole group. They would gang up on you, they would rape you. This brutal environment forced Sam to adapt quickly. He learned to defend himself, growing tougher and more aggressive to survive. I started getting rough, just like they did, he admitted. I started fighting back. Sam spent 19 months at the industrial school before being released in September 1955 at just 15 years old. When it was time to go home, no one from his family came to pick him up. He had to take a 3-hour bus ride back to Lorraine on his own. Unbeknownst to Sam, a life-altering revelation awaited him at home, one that would shatter his perception of his family and fuel his inner turmoil even further. After his return, Sam noticed a shift in how his grandparents treated him. They became stricter, punishing him harshly for any misbehavior. Whenever Sam got into trouble, they'd call Paul McDowell, who would come over to deliver a beating. Confused, Sam eventually asked one of his cousins why his brother, Paul, was the one punishing him. Sam's cousin revealed a shocking truth. Paul wasn't his brother, he was his father. When Sam confronted his grandparents, his grandmother Fanny confirmed it. Enraged, Sam lost control. In the chaos, Henry grabbed a fire poker and struck Sam on the head. Sam retaliated by putting his grandfather in a headlock, choking him as Fanny begged for his life. Realizing what he was doing, Sam let go, broke down in tears, and apologized. Fanny also began to cry, sharing the painful story of how his mother, Bessie May, had abandoned him as a baby. To Sam, it was yet another rejection by a woman he should have been able to trust. Not long after, Sam developed an unsettling habit. He began buying true crime magazines and obsessing over the images of dead women. One photograph in particular captured his attention, that of Gloria Ferry, a young blonde woman who had been strangled and left naked in a Cleveland park. Her bruised throat and lifeless, bloodshot eyes fueled his dark fantasies. Sam admitted that he lost count of how many times he fixated on her image. In September 1956, at age 16, Sam broke into a dry cleaner's shop and stole 2 suits and a fedora, wanting to impress the ladies with a sharp look. However, just 2 days later, a friend pointed out that no one would believe he had bought the suits. Overcome with fear of being caught and sent back to reform school, Sam decided to return the stolen items and confess to the shop owner, hoping for leniency. Unfortunately for Sam, the owner called the police anyway. Sam was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, along with petty larceny. At his trial on May 27, 1957, he was sentenced to 17 months at the Ohio State Reformatory. This facility was far harsher than the boys' industrial school, with around 3,000 inmates housed in cells with iron bars. During his intake, Sam was officially documented under his birth name, Samuel Little. His father, Paul McDowell, was listed as living in Lorain, Ohio, while his mother, Bessie Mae Lee, was recorded as having an unknown location. Sam later described the Ohio State Reformatory as a terrible place. He recalled how several inmates took their own lives to escape its harsh conditions. By the time Sam arrived, he was already 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds, a size that made him stand out among the other prisoners. His time at the industrial school had hardened him, and he quickly earned a reputation as a fierce fighter. The other inmates quickly learned to avoid crossing him. During his time at the reformatory, Sam formed a relationship with a fellow inmate named Wilbert Taylor, who went by the nickname Betty. Sam and Betty had met years earlier at the boys' industrial school. Betty had endured brutal abuse upon arriving at the reformatory, including being gang raped by several inmates. To survive, he adopted a submissive role, which led to him becoming known as a prison sissy. While serving time, Sam picked up a new skill, drawing. He learned from a fellow inmate, a man ironically nicknamed Don Draper, in exchange for teaching him how to fight. Sam's favorite subjects to sketch were women, reflecting his lifelong fixation. During this period, Sam received a letter from his mother, Bessie Mae, who had learned that he now knew the truth about his parentage. In the letter, she revealed that she was living in Miami. Over the next few years, they exchanged letters sporadically, though their relationship remained strained. One of the most significant skills Sam picked up during his time in the reformatory was boxing. He learned from other inmates, including Betty, who had developed her own tricks in the ring. Betty was infamous for an incident where she knocked out an inmate and then humiliated him in front of the prison yard, an act that effectively stripped the man of his status and left him vulnerable to becoming a victim himself. For Sam, boxing became a way to channel his aggression and establish dominance within the prison. Sam quickly proved himself in the boxing ring, consistently defeating his opponents in matches organized by the inmates. Even the guards placed bets on these fights, further fueling the competition. The reformatory had a history of producing successful boxers, and Sam's dominance in the ring suggested he had the potential to follow in their footsteps. However, shortly after finishing his sentence in late 1958, Sam was arrested again for breaking and entering. He was sent back to the reformatory for an additional 2 years, derailing any hopes of pursuing a professional boxing career at the time. By 1960, Sam had earned the title of the reformatory's middleweight boxing champion. His victories in the ring earned him several nicknames, such as Big Daddy, Mad Daddy, and Machine Gun. However, Sam later admitted, "I didn't like all those names. Made me feel different, like I was crazy." After his release in early 1961, his freedom was short-lived. In May, he was arrested for breaking into a furniture store through the skylight. By June, Sam found himself back in the reformatory for a third time. In 1962, tragedy struck the reformatory's boxing matches when an inmate died in the ring, leading to a temporary ban on fights. However, when matches resumed, Sam reclaimed his title as middleweight champion in both 1963 and 1964. In January 1964, at the age of 24, Sam was released from the reformatory for the third and final time. Having spent most of the past 8 years behind bars, he was far from inexperienced in certain aspects of life, yet he had never even kissed a woman. After his release, Sam returned to his grandparents' home in Lorraine. His grandfather, Henry McDowell, helped him secure a job at a factory fitting steel pipes. In his free time, Sam trained at the YMCA, holding on to the dream of becoming a professional boxer. That opportunity finally arrived in May 1965, when he was scheduled to fight in Columbus, Ohio. However, after losing the match, Sam's frustration got the better of him. He threw his boxing gloves in the trash and abandoned the sport entirely, returning to his factory job with a heavy heart. In May 1965, Sam met Jackie Pellerin, a receptionist who quickly fell deeply in love with him. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage just a few months later in August. On their wedding night, Sam experienced intimacy for the first time, but he later admitted a chilling truth. He could only climax by imagining himself strangling Jackie. For the first few months, Sam and Jackie's marriage seemed to be going well. The newlyweds lived in Jackie's mother's basement and even adopted a puppy together. However, by autumn, cracks began to appear. Sam lost interest in being intimate with Jackie and began spending his nights bar hopping, drifting further away from his new wife. Around Christmas, Sam was drinking at a bar called the Pink Elephant when he struck up a conversation with a barmaid named Diane. They eventually went back to her place, but when Diane asked for $20 in exchange for sex, Sam became enraged. He punched her with such force that she flew across the room. Then, climbing on top of her, he began choking her. However, he stopped before taking her life. Terrified, Diane offered him sex for free, but Sam refused, coldly stating that he didn't want the clap for Christmas. After leaving Diane's house, Sam got into his car and drove aimlessly for a while. He eventually stopped to relive the moment in his mind, using the memory of the attack to satisfy his dark fantasies. Feeling no remorse, Sam returned home to find Jackie still awake. She informed him that the police were looking for him. Diane had reported the incident, accusing Sam of breaking into her home and assaulting her. Without hesitation, Sam instructed Jackie to pack up her belongings, grab the dog, and get in the car. At 2 a.m., Sam and Jackie fled the state, driving southeast for several days. Their journey came to a halt in North Carolina when the car's transmission gave out. Desperate, they sold the car and their puppy to buy bus tickets to Miami. Sam's plan was to stay with his mother, Bessie May, who was running a boarding house in Coconut Grove, a suburb of Miami. When Sam and Jackie arrived at Bessie May's boarding house, she ran out to greet them with open arms. Overjoyed to see her son after so many years, she proudly showed off the strapping young man Sam had become, introducing him to her neighbors with great enthusiasm. She then helped Sam and Jackie settle into one of her best rooms, located right next to the kitchen. As the weeks went by, it became apparent that something was off with Bessie May. One day, Sam discovered that she had drilled a spy hole in the wall between the kitchen and his bedroom. When he confronted her, Bessie May gave an unsettling explanation. She wanted grandchildren and couldn't understand why Sam and Jackie weren't being intimate. A week later, Sam got back from bar hopping and found his mother drunk and waiting in the hallway. Bessie May invited Sam into her bedroom, disrobed, and they crawled into bed together. They spent a couple of hours in each other's arms, with Bessie May asking Sam to suck on her nipples. Sam complied. As the grown man suckled at his mother's breasts, he was suddenly struck by a vision of him biting Bessie May's nipples clean off and eating them. Sam then imagined that he was eating the rest of his mother until nothing was left. After several more minutes of unsettling and bizarre intimacy, Sam finally got up and left his mother's room. He quietly returned to his own bedroom, where Jackie was already asleep, completely unaware of what had just occurred. In February 1966, a friend of Bessie May visited the boarding house. While Sam and Jackie were in the kitchen, with Jackie cooking gumbo, the guest, clearly drunk, made a comment. She joked that Jackie must be an exceptional cook, because there was no other way she could have married someone as handsome as Sam. The remark sent Sam into a sudden rage. In his fury, he accidentally knocked over the pot of gumbo, scalding Jackie's legs. Grabbing a butcher's knife, Sam pinned the guest against the wall and began striking her with the knife handle in a violent outburst. Sam was strangely exhilarated by the sheer terror on the woman's face, nearly losing control in the moment. Eventually, he dropped the knife and let her go. Terrified, the woman fled the house, shouting that she was going to call the police. Fearing the consequences, Sam and Jackie quickly packed their belongings and left. Before departing, Sam assured a distraught Bessie May that he would return soon. Taking Bessie May's car, Sam and Jackie drove back to Ohio, eventually staying with Jackie's aunt in Cleveland. However, Jackie's aunt quickly grew suspicious of Sam, seeing him as trouble. The very next morning, she called the police. Officers arrived promptly and arrested Sam for the alleged rape of Diane, the barmaid he had attacked in Lorraine the previous December. Despite Sam's arrest, the district attorney decided not to pursue the case. Diane's medical examination showed no physical evidence of sexual assault, and her claim that Sam had broken in through her window didn't hold up. There were no signs of forced entry. Instead, clear footprints in the snow indicated the assailant had entered and exited through the front door. With insufficient evidence, the charges were dropped and Sam was released. While Sam was in jail, Jackie's family took matters into their own hands. They convinced her to leave him, initiated divorce proceedings, and removed her from Sam's life. Just a week after his release in March 1966, Sam stole a car and robbed a liquor store to fund his journey back to Miami. During his getaway, he ran a red light and collided with a van at an intersection. Fearing capture, Sam abandoned the stolen car and fled on foot to a nearby Greyhound station. Sam boarded the first departing bus and ended up in Baltimore. Soon after arriving, he attempted to rob another liquor store. This time, however, the store owner fought back, pulling out a .38 caliber pistol and shooting Sam 5 times. Sam collapsed on the floor and later woke up in a hospital bed, handcuffed and under guard. Once recovered, he stood trial for armed robbery and was sentenced to 4 years at the Maryland State Penitentiary. Sam was granted parole for good behavior in February 1969 at the age of 28 after serving roughly half of his sentence. By this point in his life, Sam had spent approximately 12 of the past 15 years in correctional facilities, with the majority of his young adulthood shaped by life behind bars. After his time in the Maryland State Penitentiary, Sam boarded a bus from Baltimore back to Miami, finally returning nearly 3 years later than planned. Bessie May was overjoyed to see him and welcomed him back warmly. She set him up in the same room next to the kitchen, fed him plate after plate of barbecued ribs, and wasted no time bringing up her favorite topic, her desire for grandchildren. By this time, Bessie May, now in her mid-40s, had developed a severe dependence on whiskey and was slowly drinking herself to death. Her fixation on having grandchildren remained, and within 2 days of Sam's return to Miami, he began a relationship with a woman named Yvonne. However, Bessie May's behavior took a disturbing turn. She would spy on Sam and Yvonne through the hole she had drilled in the wall of his bedroom. Sam found work as a garbage collector to make ends meet, establishing a semblance of routine. During the day he worked hard, but his nights were spent bar hopping and drinking heavily before eventually returning to Bessie May's boarding house. Yvonne didn't remain in his life for long, as Sam showed little interest in her or in physical intimacy. Meanwhile, Bessie May continued to pressure Sam about giving her grandchildren, her obsession undiminished. And then one night, Sam claims that he woke up to discover that his mother had crawled into bed with him. Quote, "I woke up and she was lying next to me in bed. She looked at my dick and said, 'Oh, look at how big my son's dick is.'" According to Sam, These disturbing and incestuous encounters continued sporadically over the next few years. While some might dismiss these claims as the ramblings of a depraved serial killer, Sam's confessions have been eerily consistent and accurate in nearly every other detail of his life. This unsettling reliability leaves room to consider that these claims might also hold a degree of truth. Nearly 2 years passed before Sam's dark urges surfaced again. On New Year's Eve in 1970, he was drinking at a tavern in Overtown, a party hub in Miami. There, he noticed Mary Jo Brosley, a 33-year-old white woman, sitting alone at the end of the bar.
The first victim I had was in by January or February of 1970.
Okay.
Over in Miami, Coconut Grove, Miami.
Yeah. First killing. Did you know that you wanted to kill her?
Yeah. Yeah, I had desire, strong desire to
Mary Jo was a manic depressive alcoholic who had recently left her husband and 2 children in Boston. She had come to Miami to escape her troubles, turning to alcohol and sex work to survive. Spotting an opportunity, Sam bought her 3 gin and tonics, ensuring she was intoxicated before suggesting they go for a drive. Mary Jo told Sam her price was $50, equivalent to about $395 today. Sam agreed without hesitation. The two left the bar and got into Sam's car, driving away from Overtown. He kept driving until they had left Miami altogether. At some point during the journey, Mary Jo fell asleep, unaware of her surroundings. When she woke up, the car was parked deep in the forest near Homestead, Florida, about 40 miles southwest of Miami. Sam suggested they move to the back seat, and that's when his violent fantasy became reality. Reflecting on the event, Sam later admitted, "She was the first girl I ever did it to. I took her life. I took her out into the woods alone, just me and her. She didn't know I was about to make my fantasy come true. I put my hands around her throat, kissed her, and started squeezing. This time I didn't stop, I went all the way. I put my hand around her neck, and that was it." In a chilling statement, Sam claimed she evidently wanted it to happen. After killing Mary Jo, Sam was consumed by a disturbing sense of ownership. He later described feeling as though she now belonged to him entirely, his and his alone, forever. Speaking to her lifeless body, he repeatedly told her that he loved her, even kissing her lips. But soon, panic set in. Realizing he needed to dispose of the body, Sam began planning his next move. Sam dragged Mary Jo's body out of the car and tried to dig a shallow grave using his hands, but the ground was too hard. Frustrated, he rolled her body into a thick patch of bushes and drove off. The next morning, he returned to the scene with a shovel, but his attempt at burial was careless, leaving one of her feet exposed. Sometime later, an alligator tore off part of her leg, but discarded it nearby. Within hours, news spread in Miami that a hiker had discovered a human foot in the Everglades. Mary Jo's skeletal remains were discovered weeks later, but to Sam's surprise, he wasn't caught. He had expected authorities to connect him to the crime, but no significant effort seemed to be made. No one of importance had reported Mary Jo missing, and the plight of a struggling sex worker from Boston appeared to draw little attention. Shockingly, her remains wouldn't be officially identified until 2017. Sam committed his first murder at the age of 30, a relatively late start compared to many serial killers. However, the act awakened something dark within him. Reflecting on it later, Sam admitted, "I didn't think I'd make it a reality. I didn't lose control until, suddenly, I wanted more, and I asked the good Lord why me."
I didn't go crazy on it until all of a sudden, I wanted more. And so I asked the good Lord, I said, "Why me?"
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
So do you need to clear your conscience before you go? Or is that a one-way conversation with Him?
Well, the point with God is I never told anybody it was Him.
Years later, Sam would confess to killing dozens of women. His confessions included detailed descriptions, and he even created eerily accurate portraits of many of his victims, a skill he developed during jailhouse art lessons with Don Draper. However, Sam's memory for names, dates, and exact locations was often unreliable, leaving the timeline of his crimes somewhat unclear and shrouded in uncertainty. Despite the inconsistencies in Sam's recollections, it's possible to piece together the sequence of his crimes using available records and reliable sources. While some dates may differ from what is reported on platforms like Wikipedia or similar websites, this reconstruction is based on more credible and detailed information. In 1971, Sam murdered an unidentified white woman of unknown age and origin. He dumped her body at the same location near Homestead where he had buried Mary Jo Brosley. This time, however, he didn't bother with the burial. Convinced he could be caught at any moment, Sam felt it was pointless to put in the effort. The woman's body was left exposed to the elements and local wildlife and was never recovered.
Pig farm or something. Wow. And that's how they found the girl that laying in the field next to the pig farm. All the mother in ate off of fish. The rats got over.
When reflecting on the unidentified woman's murder, Sam chillingly stated, "It was the same procedure as last time. I asked her, 'What would you do if I strangled you?' And she replied, 'There ain't much I could do, bless her heart.'" Not long after, Sam killed another victim, a black woman approximately 22 years old. He left her body in the countryside just outside Miami. Years later, Sam speculated that her name might have been Linda. Later that same year, Sam killed another woman whom he believed might have been named Sarah or Donna. He speculated that she was possibly from New England. Her body was discarded in Kendall, a suburban area in the Miami metropolitan region.
There's indications of visualization of when he's thinking about a crime scene, he'll start stroking his face. As he's starting to picture a victim, you'll see him look out and up, and you can tell he has this revolving carousel of victims, and it's just spinning, and he's waiting for it to stop at the one that he wants to talk about.
Around 1971, or possibly 1972, Sam claimed another victim, a 28-year-old black woman from Miami. According to Sam, she had mentioned having some connection to the United States Air Force before her death. Sam lured each of these women into his vehicle, drove them to secluded areas, and strangled them to death. In May 1971, he claimed a more identifiable victim, Karen O'Donohue, a 25-year-old nurse from Springfield, Massachusetts. Karen had disappeared in July 1969, just weeks before her wedding. By 1971, she had somehow made her way to Florida. According to Sam, he met Karen in a bar shortly after she was discharged from a mental health facility in Miami. He lured her to the woods near Homestead, Florida, and strangled her, leaving her body exposed to the elements and wildlife. Though Karen's remains have never been found, Sam's confession provided enough details to link him to her disappearance. Sam described his victims in chilling terms. They were just like a herd of cattle, sheep to be slaughtered and turned into lamb chops. You picked the girls and it didn't matter. Some were lawyers, school teachers, people who'd be missed. But I went for the drug addicts, the prostitutes, the lonely women, the crazy ones, women lost in the world. They'd tease you, showing their buttocks, their ass. That's what gets me into that mood. Desires turn into drives, like, I want this, or else.
Get in, go out there with the people that will be immediately missed. Yeah. And very important to either family or business or somebody.
Yeah, you got pretty good at knowing which ones.
Well, I'm not going to go over there in the white neighborhood and pick out the little young teenage girl or like the medias do. They didn't know who the hell was doing it. Yeah. I'll go back to the same city sometime and pluck me another grape. I said, how many grapes y'all got on the vine here? Ooh, sure. That one right over.
There's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So basically these were women nobody would miss.
Like a lion wanting to get his claws on a zebra. Sam reflected on his victims with an unsettling perspective. It's a strange thing about these women. A lot of them had a death wish. If they were alive today, they'd be my friends. They didn't die mad at me. They were my friends. I didn't hate them and they didn't hate me. I loved all the women. When they die, they become your favorites. They belong to you. If they were alive to this day, they'd be my friends. In March 1972, Sam was drinking at the Pool Palace, a bar located in Overtown, Miami. In later confessions, he mistakenly identified the location as Liberty City, a nearby district about 10 minutes away. While nursing his beer, Sam noticed 3 young women, likely around 18 or 19 years old, dancing and singing near the jukebox. Their names were Giselle, Penny, and Marianne. Fixated on Marianne, who stood about 5'7" and weighed roughly 130 pounds.
5'7", 5'6". She weighed about 135, maybe 140.
And how old do you think she was?
But she was 19.
Sam approached her and declared that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Sam was surprised to learn that Marianne was a male-to-female transgender woman. Despite the heavy stigma surrounding this in the 1970s, Sam remained unfazed. His years at the Ohio State Reformatory, where he had a relationship with a fellow inmate named Betty, may have influenced his reaction. Sam asked Marianne to dance, and she accepted. Emotional from a recent breakup with a man named Wes and slightly intoxicated, Marianne suddenly began crying during their dance, sobbing into Sam's shirt. In response, Sam leaned in and kissed her on the dance floor. When the song ended, Marianne asked Sam to drive her back to her apartment.
Bringing her back to the apartment. I went down 27th Street. That's going down to Fort Lauderdale, called the Alligator Alley. It runs into the Alligator Alley.
Right.
But the further out you get, the further you get out of Miami.
Right.
And you got vegetation.
But as they drove, he intentionally missed the correct route and turned onto I-27, heading toward Fort Lauderdale. After driving for about 2 miles, Marianne became suspicious and demanded that they turn around. Sam, feigning calm, told her there was nowhere to turn just yet and suggested they pull over to relax for a moment. Sam eventually turned off the main road onto a forested trail known as Alligator Alley. By now, Marianne was visibly frightened. Sam brought the car to a stop, turned to her, and said, "I love you, brah." Sensing danger, Marianne acted quickly. She grabbed a can of Magic Shave, a powdered hair remover, and threw it into Sam's eyes, momentarily blinding him. The sting from the powdered hair remover was excruciating, temporarily blinding Sam and giving Marianne the opportunity to escape. She scrambled out of the car and ran down the road, but her pace was hindered. She had only one high heel on, while the other foot was bare. Before she could make much distance, the second heel slipped off, and Sam caught up to her, tackling her to the ground. Sam strangled Marianne until she was disoriented and barely conscious, but he stopped short of killing her. He dragged her back to the car and forced her onto the floor near the back seat. Kneeling over her, Sam pulled down his trousers and continued to strangle her with one hand while satisfying himself with the other. When Marianne's body went limp, Sam dragged her from the car and into the undergrowth. He found a patch of muddy, waterlogged ground and discarded her face down in the muck. Without a second thought, he returned to his car and drove away, leaving her lifeless body behind. Marianne's disappearance went unnoticed. Estranged from her family and marginalized by society, she was just another victim overlooked by law enforcement in 1972, especially as a transgender woman who occasionally worked as a sex worker. Years later, during one of Sam's confessions, he vividly recalled Marianne and even drew a detailed portrait of her. Despite this, identifying her took time, as she had been listed in the missing persons database under her birth name, Curtis Lee. In May 1972, Sam decided to head north to visit his grandmother, Fanny, in Lorain, Idaho. His grandfather, Henry, had passed away a few years earlier. Before Sam left Miami, Bessie May had a complete emotional breakdown, screaming, crying, and begging him not to leave. Despite her pleas, Sam was determined to make the trip and set off to see his grandmother. Sam traveled north, passing through Baltimore before heading inland. During his journey, he committed another murder in Prince George's County, Maryland. His victim was a white woman, likely between the ages of 20 and 25, whom Sam believed was from Massachusetts. Decades later, his confession was linked to a Jane Doe case, though the woman's identity remains unknown to this day. When Sam arrived in Lorraine, his grandmother Fanny welcomed him warmly, but cautioned him to stay out of trouble. He stayed for several days, during which time he encountered Lucy Madero, a woman he found staggering drunk down the street one night. The two went to a bar together and played pool. Initially, Sam planned to kill Lucy, but when she attempted to pickpocket him, he slapped her across the face and warned her not to try it again. Lucy's groveling, submissive apology struck a chord with Sam. For the first time, he found someone he could dominate and control without resorting to violence. Sam and Lucy rented a motel room where they spent the night drinking their way through a bottle of whiskey. This marked the beginning of a brief relationship, with Lucy becoming Sam's new girlfriend. The pair eventually left Lorraine and drove to Cleveland. However, their crime spree caught up with them when they were arrested in the suburb of Westlake for attempting to rob a gas station. Both were detained and locked up in the Cuyahoga County Courthouse practically every 3 years. It was a time of growth, planning, and stress. While in custody, Lucy shared a cell with the 59-year-old shoplifter named Aurelia Dorsey, who went by the name Jean. Lucy quickly warmed to Jean, striking up conversations with her, though Jean secretly didn't think much of Lucy but hid her feelings. Meanwhile, Sam was being held in a cell block directly below theirs. After a few days, Sam discovered a small hole in the crumbling stone floor that allowed him to communicate with Lucy from his cell. Sam spent hours over the next day talking to both Lucy and Jean through the hole in the floor. Jean quickly took a liking to Sam, intrigued by his charm. That evening, Lucy made a fatal mistake. She whispered to Jean that she had struck a deal with the police to testify against Sam in exchange for having the robbery charges against her dropped. Jean immediately passed this information along to Sam. Armed with this warning, Sam's defense lawyer was able to uncover Lucy's extensive criminal history and use it to discredit her in court. As a result, Sam was acquitted and walked free. And after successfully avoiding conviction for her shoplifting charges, Jean and Sam developed a romantic relationship. Despite the significant age difference, Jean was 59 and Sam was 32, he treated her differently than his previous partners. Out of gratitude and what appeared to be genuine affection, Sam refrained from harming her. The pair stayed in Cleveland for several weeks, during which Sam acted as Jean's getaway driver. Sam acted as Jean's getaway driver, as she did for Sarah and 2 of the childhood friends whose names were listed here. She brazenly walked into stores and malls, emerging with bags of stolen jewelry and merchandise, while Sam waited nearby to ensure their escape. After about a month in Cleveland, Sam proposed an idea to Jean. They should travel to Miami and open a restaurant together. Jean, an excellent cook, loved the idea and eagerly agreed. The two made their way south to Miami, where they stayed with Bessie Mae in Coconut Grove. However, Bessie Mae was less than thrilled to see her son return with a woman 10 years older than herself. After settling in Miami, Sam and Jean rented a small space in a strip mall and opened a modest restaurant called Samuel Little's Southern Kitchen. Though business was far from booming, they managed to scrape by, selling fried chicken, grits, and cornbread to cover their expenses. Remarkably, during this period, Sam refrained from committing any violent acts. The couple even adopted a German shepherd they named Buster, adding a sense of normalcy to their lives. In April 1973, Bessie Mae's persistent demands for grandchildren took a strange turn when she noticed her belly swelling. Believing it to be a miracle pregnancy at the age of 49, she was overjoyed. Unfortunately for her, the swelling turned out to be a symptom of liver disease, not the child she had been hoping for. By May 1973, Bessie Mae had passed away due to cirrhosis. Sam would later claim she died in his arms, but the truth was far less sentimental. Bessie Mae was rushed to the hospital and passed away alone before Sam could even arrive. Her death hit Sam hard, leaving him more volatile than ever. When Jean showed little sympathy for his loss, Sam's grief turned into uncontrollable rage. In the middle of the street, he knocked Jean to the ground and began beating her viciously with his fists. Concerned neighbors gathered around as Buster, their German shepherd, barked frantically, running in circles. The assault only stopped when a neighbor, armed with a shotgun, threatened Sam and demanded he leave Jean alone. Stance became more sporadic throughout the night as he was held at gunpoint and threatened Sam, and demanded he leave Jean alone. By the time Sam relented, Jean was bleeding from her nose and mouth and had suffered 2 broken ribs. Without a word, Sam stood up, got into his car, and drove off. He didn't stop until he reached New Orleans. There, still seething with anger and grief, Sam encountered Sarah Brown, a 39-year-old single mother who worked as a waitress at a restaurant on Canal Street. As Sarah walked to a bus stop after her shift, Sam pulled his car alongside her, offering a ride. Sarah declined, showing caution, but Sam didn't take no for an answer. He forced her into his car and drove out of New Orleans, eventually stopping in a remote field beyond the city limits. Unable to recall the exact location later, Sam shoved Sarah into the back seat, stripped her of her clothes, and began strangling her. Sam took his time, carefully releasing Sarah's neck every so often to keep her alive longer. He wanted to prolong the experience. Reflecting on the moment, Sam later said, "I fulfilled my imagination and desires through force. I had to take what I wanted. I was lower than a serpent. A snake only kills through fear or hunger. I was killing for pleasure." At one point, Sarah managed to convince Sam that she needed to relieve herself. Not wanting her to urinate inside his car, he pulled her out and watched closely as she squatted in the field. Seizing an opportunity, Sarah suddenly bolted, running naked across the open terrain. However, Sam quickly caught up, tackled her to the ground, and ended her life by strangling her to death. Sam admitted that he left Sarah's body where he killed her. His reasoning was no longer rooted in fear of being caught. Instead, he believed that these women weren't significant enough for authorities to investigate. "I didn't waste no time digging bodies," he later confessed. To this day, the exact field where Sarah was murdered remains unknown. The humid Louisiana climate likely eroded her remains, leaving them buried under layers of wet soil. After her death, Sarah was placed in leather bags and removed to the basement of a library in Washington to be removed to the cemetery. Shortly after her disappearance, only her purse was found, lying abandoned on a New Orleans street. For decades, Sarah was considered a missing person until Sam's confession finally matched her case. After killing Sarah, Sam wasted no time leaving New Orleans, wary of staying too long in case someone had witnessed the abduction. Over the next few days, he traveled through Mississippi and Alabama before arriving in Macon, Georgia. There, he met a mentally ill black woman named Nina. Initially, Sam planned to kill her, but her meek and submissive demeanor, much like Lucy Madero's before her, saved her life. Nina soon became Sam's next girlfriend. He also took on the role of her pimp, dropping her off on street corners in various cities to earn money for their travels. Together, they spent the rest of 1973 journeying across the South, eventually making their way to Texas. From there, they continued westward, traveling through New Mexico, Arizona, and California, where they briefly enjoyed the Pacific coastline. By autumn, the pair had ventured north into Oregon, then east into Idaho, Wyoming, and finally Nebraska. On November 1, 1973, in Omaha, Nebraska, Sam spotted a 34-year-old woman named Agatha White Buffalo at a local bar called the Happy Bar. While Nina worked a street corner nearby, Sam zeroed in on Agatha. A Native American woman from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, Agatha had left her abusive husband and traveled to Nebraska in search of a fresh start. Her 7 children were either in boarding school or being cared for by relatives. For the time being, Agatha stayed with friends and sought work as a maid. Agatha was at the Happy Bar that night, drinking with 2 friends named Phyllis and Diane. Sam approached her with a crude comment, "You're a real Indian. Where are your feathers?" Agatha, unimpressed, responded dryly that she had left them at home. Sam, pretending curiosity, claimed he had never met a Native American before. As the night went on, Agatha, weighed down by the pain of her failed marriage and separation from her children, confessed that she sometimes wished she hadn't woken up that morning. Half-jokingly, Sam offered to help Agatha with her wish, but beneath his humor, he was intrigued. Agatha quickly dismissed her comment, saying she didn't mean it. Sam then suggested they go back to his motel and share a bottle of whiskey. Despite her friend Phyllis's pleading warnings, Phyllis said she had a bad feeling about Sam. Agatha ignored the advice and agreed to go with him. Instead of heading to his motel, Sam drove her into the woods. If Agatha realized they were leaving Omaha, she didn't voice her concern. Years later, Sam tried to justify her murder, claiming she had given him permission. He said, "Now, if she agreed to leave with me in my car, and it turned out we were alone in the woods, what did she go out there for? When she let me put my hands around her neck, closed her eyes and laid her head back, that's a signal of permission. She wanted to enter another realm, another world." Sam disposed of Agatha's nude body by stuffing it into a barrel behind a tannery. 2 weeks later, on November 17, her remains were discovered. However, her murder remained unsolved for decades until Sam's confession in 2018 finally brought clarity to her case. Sam disposed of Agatha's nude body by stuffing it into a barrel behind a tannery. 2 weeks later, on November 17th, her remains were discovered. However, her murder remained unsolved for decades until Sam's confession in 2018 finally brought clarity to her case. As Sam and Nina left Omaha, a news story on the radio reported the discovery of a woman's body in a barrel. Sam later claimed that Nina's expression made it clear she knew he was responsible. Despite this, they continued their journey, traveling through Nebraska into Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and finally crossing into New York. When they arrived in Harlem, Sam instructed Nina to go earn some money on the streets, while he parked the car and headed into a nearby bar. There, he drank heavily and smoked weed while sitting in a booth. During his time there, he struck up a conversation with a soldier from the U.S. Army. The two talked and drank together before the soldier suggested they go to his hotel room to enjoy a steak dinner through room service. When they reached the soldier's hotel room, the mood shifted. As they began kissing, Sam instinctively grabbed the soldier's throat and started to squeeze. The soldier immediately fought back, flipping Sam onto his back. The situation quickly reversed, with Sam being choked as the soldier yelled at him and called him crazy. Sam fought back with everything he had, but the soldier overpowered him. At one point, the soldier bit down on Sam's index finger, severing the tip entirely. Blood gushed from the wound as Sam screamed in pain. Taking advantage of the chaos, the soldier lifted Sam by his belt and threw him into the hallway, punctuating the encounter with a hard kick before slamming the door shut. Humiliated and injured, Sam picked himself up off the hallway floor and left the hotel. He returned to his car, found Nina, and drove to the emergency room to have the remains of his index finger stitched up. After leaving the hospital, Sam and Nina drove to New Jersey. However, trouble found them again when a police patrol car caught Nina performing oral sex on Sam near the side of a gas station. When the officers approached, Sam resisted arrest and assaulted one of them in the process. As a result, he was sentenced to several weeks in a workhouse prison in Trenton. While serving his sentence, Sam received a letter from Jean Dorsey urging him to join her in Los Angeles after his release. Meanwhile, Buster, the German shepherd he once shared with Jean, had been adopted by a former neighbor in Miami. In early 1974, Sam walked out of the prison gates to find Nina waiting for him with a white Thunderbird. During his time inside, Nina had supported herself by working the streets of Trenton. Together, they set off for Los Angeles. During their journey, Sam picked up an unidentified black female sex worker in Cincinnati, Ohio. The three of them continued on to Columbus, where Sam murdered the woman by strangling her and dumping her body. He and Nina then continued their drive south. As they continued south, Sam and Nina made a brief detour into Arizona. While in Phoenix on March 2, 1974, Sam abducted 22-year-old Linda Belcher, a single mother with an 8-year-old son. He strangled her and left her body on 59th Avenue in the middle of the city. After arriving in Los Angeles, Sam checked Nina into the Cecil Hotel, a notorious location with its own share of dark history, and then went to reconnect with Jean. The last time Sam had seen Jean was in May 1973, when he brutally beat her in the middle of the street, breaking 2 of her ribs. Yet, in Jean's mind, all was forgiven. When they reunited, she welcomed him warmly, serving him drinks and preparing a lavish meal as if nothing had ever happened. Sam and Jean rekindled their relationship, even becoming intimate again. Despite his violent tendencies, Sam resisted the urge to harm her. Jean's unwavering devotion seemed to overshadow all else, and Sam quickly forgot about Nina, who was still waiting for him at the Cecil Hotel. 2 weeks passed before he returned, only to find Nina gone. Years later, Sam learned that Nina had suffered a nervous breakdown, reportedly mumbling incoherently about dead girls. Nina's mother was contacted, and she flew to Los Angeles to retrieve her daughter. Nina was subsequently institutionalized in a mental asylum in Milledgeville, Georgia, where she remained for several years. With Nina gone, Sam shifted his focus back to Jean and decided to take her on the road. Together, they traveled across the United States for the remainder of 1974. During their travels, Sam murdered an unidentified black woman believed to be between 22 and 23 years old in Savannah, Georgia. The pair also returned briefly to Miami, where Sam killed another woman around 23 or 24 years old. He later speculated her name might have been Emily and that she had attended the University of Miami. However, it remains possible that Emily's murder occurred in 1975. By this point, Jean was fully aware of Sam's murderous activities. While he went out alone to stalk his victims, she typically stayed behind at the motel. After each killing, Jean would clean the backseat of the car herself, sometimes taking jewelry, clothing, or other personal belongings left behind by the victims. Sam found Jean's habit of scavenging personal items from his victims distasteful, and once referred to her as a sniveling dog, ignoring the irony of his far worse crimes. Despite his disdain, Sam kept Jean close because she proved useful. She cooked for him, helped dispose of evidence, shoplifted valuable items, and always had a fake alibi ready when needed.
You were a traveling man all your life, right? How did you make money to buy cars, shoplifting?
Me and my old lady, Jean was, she was 70 some years. She about 30 years older than me. She's a shoplifter, and I was the driver, and we'd go all over the country, everywhere. I'd stop in places overnight in the motels. She's an old lady, you know, and I'd go out the street looking for a girl. That's how I got around so many places.
Because of her, you were able to kind of go around, right? Because she had the money coming in.
Yeah,
right? She knew you were going out with women.
Yeah, she knew.
But she didn't know that there was killing going on.
No, right? She didn't know I was going that far.
At 61 years old, Jean seemed completely infatuated with the much younger, physically imposing 34-year-old Sam. With few other options in her life, she stayed by his side. As Sam himself later put it, she just clung to me because I think she just loved me. She was an angel, let's put it that way. Sam and Jean's violent journey continued, bringing them to Knoxville, Tennessee, around December 1974. On New Year's Eve, Sam abducted 34-year-old Martha Cunningham near the Circle Tavern Inn. He drove her out of town, strangled her, and discarded her body on a desolate dirt road in East Knox County. Back at home, Martha had a teenage daughter waiting for her return. Martha Cunningham's body was discovered by hunters on January 18, 1975. The coroner, unable to determine a clear cause of death, overlooked the bruising on her throat. His judgment may have been influenced by her family's account that Martha suffered from seizures. With the death not classified as a homicide, no investigation followed. It wasn't until decades later through Sam Little's confession, that the truth of her murder was finally uncovered. Before leaving Knoxville, Sam struck again, murdering another unidentified black woman whom he estimated to be around 25 years old. Her identity and details remain a mystery. Sam later admitted he couldn't remember how many women he killed in 1975. By May 16, 1976, he and Jean had returned to Miami, Florida, where Sam abducted Miriam Chapman, a 25-year-old sex worker who also went by the name Anna. Miriam had arrived in Miami from Indiana earlier that year. Those who knew her described her as surprisingly naive and innocent for her circumstances. 2 weeks before her death, she had been arrested and spent a few days in jail. The warden, taking pity on her, even bought her a bus ticket home. However, after her release, Miriam chose to remain in a rundown Miami motel, telling acquaintances she needed to save up a bit more money before returning to Indiana to reunite with her family. Sam murdered Miriam and disposed of her body in the Everglades. Her remains were later discovered by hikers. After this, Sam and Jean continued their journey, moving on to Wichita Falls, Texas. There, Sam killed another unidentified black woman, whom he estimated to be between 25 and 28 years old. Their travels next took them to Sunset Hills, Missouri. On September 11, 1976, Sam abducted Pamela K. Smith. He bound her hands with an electrical cord, tore off her clothes, and stole the money from her purse. He then brutally assaulted her, beating, biting, and strangling her, and ultimately violating her. Despite the violence she endured, Pamela managed to escape from Sam's car and flee into the night. Desperate for help, she pounded on the door of a nearby house. The startled homeowner opened the door to find a terrified, naked woman pleading for help, explaining that a man was after her. The stranger brought Pamela inside and called the police. Sam was arrested shortly afterward, and Pamela identified him in a police lineup. Sam faced several charges including rape, sodomy, assault, grievous bodily harm, and robbery. However, in a miscarriage of justice, he was convicted only of the lesser charge of assault with intent to ravish and sentenced to a mere 3 months in a Missouri prison. When Sam was released in December 1976, he reconnected with Jean, and the two resumed their violent travels. Along the way, they picked up a sex worker in Missouri, an identified black woman around 26 years old, whom Sam recalled as Joe. They drove to Granite City, Illinois, where Sam murdered the woman and discarded her body on the outskirts of town. From Granite City, Sam and Jean continued to East St. Louis, Illinois. There, Sam killed another unidentified black woman whose age remains unknown. The bodies of both victims were never recovered. Sam and Jean wandered through the Midwest for several months before returning to East St. Louis. In April 1977, Sam abducted 22-year-old Mary Ann Jenkins. He left her body naked in the countryside with only her jewelry still on. Investigators found no evidence of sexual assault and either missed the bruising on her neck or dismissed it entirely. In a bizarre twist, local authorities theorized that Jenkins had been killed by a lightning strike, likely a convenient explanation to close the case. Mary Ann Jenkins' death was not linked to Sam Little until 2019, more than 4 decades later. At the time of her murder, Jenkins was the mother of a 4-year-old boy. After her killing, Sam and Jane traveled south to Florida. One night in downtown Miami, Sam encountered Dorothy Gibson, a 17-year-old sex worker, as she exited her hotel. He persuaded her to get into his car with promises of payment, but immediately strangled her. Sam discarded Dorothy's body in the bushes behind the hotel. In a tragic miscarriage of justice, another man was wrongfully arrested, tried, and convicted for Dorothy Gibson's murder. He served 22 years in prison before finally being exonerated in 1999. While still in Florida, Sam abducted another unidentified black woman in Clearwater. He later dumped her body on the outskirts of Plant City. However, there is some uncertainty about the timeline, and this murder may have occurred in 1978. Sam and Jean then traveled to Atlanta, Georgia. On June 26, 1977, Sam abducted 21-year-old Leanne Helms from a nightclub in the city's downtown area. The next day, a Department of Transportation worker discovered her body in the woods near Oakley Industrial Boulevard. The coroner ruled her cause of death as strangulation, but the case went cold and remained unsolved for decades. Following the murder of Leanne Helms, Sam and Jean passed through Macon, Georgia. There, Sam targeted Yvonne Pless, a homeless woman and possible sex worker around 20 years old. He strangled her and left her body on the side of Arkwright Road. By the time her remains were discovered, they were so badly decomposed that Yvonne went unidentified until 2021, when her DNA was finally matched to a family member through a genealogy search. While in Macon, Sam learned that his ex-girlfriend Nina had been institutionalized in Milledgeville, Georgia. In a surprising move, Sam and Jean drove to the facility and managed to smuggle Nina out of the building and into their car. It didn't take long for Sam to realize that Nina's mental health had significantly declined since their last encounter. Her nervous breakdown had taken a toll, and Sam decided she was no longer fit to travel with them. He dropped Nina off in front of a movie theater and instructed her to buy tickets while he parked the car. Instead, he drove off and circled the block. The last time Sam saw Nina, she was standing outside the theater, holding the tickets and looking around, confused, for his return. Sam assumed, without much concern, that someone would eventually find Nina and return her to Milledgeville. About a month later, Sam and Jean found themselves in Gulfport, Mississippi. On August 2, 1977, Sam met 44-year-old Clara Birdlong at a bar. After taking her out for dinner, Sam strangled Clara and disposed of her body in a wooded area near the interstate highway in Ashitapa, Mississippi. Her remains weren't discovered until December 27th, and she remained unidentified as a Jane Doe until 2021. From Gulfport, Sam and Jean continued to Pascagoula, Mississippi, where Sam killed another woman. This victim, estimated to be between 35 and 45 years old, remains unidentified. The exact number of women Sam killed in 1978 and 1979 is unclear, but records show he began 1978 with the murder of 36-year-old Julia Critchfield. On January 21, in Saucier, Mississippi, Sam abducted and killed Julia, rolling her body off a cliff. Her remains were found the next day at the bottom of a dirt pit. Julia's death was immediately classified as a homicide, but without any leads or suspects, the case went cold. At the time of her murder, Julia left behind a 15-year-old daughter. On September 5, 1978, Sam abducted 19-year-old Evelyn Weston in Columbia, South Carolina. He murdered her and left her body near Fort Jackson. During his time in South Carolina, Sam also killed another unidentified black woman, believed to be in her 20s, in the city of Charleston. On November 23, 1978, in Plaquemine Parish, Louisiana, Sam Little claimed the life of his youngest victim, 14-year-old Carlene Jones. Using information he overheard about Carlene's mother, he lured the teenager away from her home. He later murdered her and dumped her body near an embankment. Later that year, in 1978, Sam abducted an unidentified black woman from Cleveland, Ohio. She was estimated to be between 17 and 25 years old. Sam killed her and left her body at the bottom of a hill in a wooded area near the interstate highway. Her remains were not found until March 13, 1983, 5 years later. Then, on August 27, 1979, Sam lured 23-year-old Brenda Alexander from the Tap Room, a nightclub in Columbus, Alabama. He strangled her and abandoned her body in a wooded area in Phoenix City. Brenda's body was found naked, with only her watch remaining. Nearby, investigators found a beer bottle and an empty cigarette pack. Reflecting on his crimes, Sam once said, "Those girls, I pray that they forgive me the same way God did. He made me the way I am." He forgave me even while I was doing it, Sam continued. That's why I got away with so much evil like that. God was with me, not against me. By the end of the 1970s, Samuel Little had murdered at least 33 victims. Remarkably, only one of his intended victims escaped. This tally placed him ahead of Ted Bundy and on par with John Wayne Gacy. If he had been caught in 1979, he would have ranked as the 5th most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. Yet Sam showed no intention of stopping, and it would take nearly half a century before justice caught up with him. On July 31, 1980, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, Samuel Little sat on a bench outside the Carver Village Motel and Apartments, a run-down and squalid complex. As he observed a group of sex workers on a nearby street corner, one woman, 26-year-old Hilda Nelson, separated from the group and returned to her room. As Hilda walked by, Sam initiated a conversation. After exchanging casual pleasantries, the discussion shifted to negotiating a price for sex. They eventually struck a deal, and Hilda led Sam to her room. Inside the room, Sam suddenly attacked Hilda, striking her on the back of the head. He threw her to the floor, viciously beat her, and then used her own scarf to choke her. Before Sam could finish his attack, there was a knock at the door. It was Hilda's friend Dolores Hester calling out her name. Thinking quickly, Sam shouted back, "She'll be out in a minute." Realizing the situation was too risky, Sam decided against killing Hilda. He released her and stormed out of the room. Hilda was taken to Singing River Hospital, where she spent 3 days recovering from her injuries. To hide her occupation as a sex worker from her mother, Hilda claimed she had interrupted a burglary in her room. With little effort put into investigating her case, Sam once again evaded arrest. As Sam and Jean left Mississippi, they made a stop in Gulfport. There, Sam murdered another unidentified black woman, estimated to be around 22 years old. On October 28, 1980, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Sam abducted 18-year-old Valeria Boyd. He strangled her in his car and left her body in a field outside Allen County. However, Sam wasn't finished for the night. A few hours later, Sam returned to Fort Wayne, where he encountered 31-year-old Mary Ann Porter. He murdered her as well, discarding her body along a dirt road in rural Allen County. Both women's families filed missing persons reports by the end of October. Valeria's body was discovered on November 4, followed by the discovery of Mary Ann Porter's remains on December 13th. With no suspects in either case, both investigations went cold. On May 12, 2081, Sam met 23-year-old Linda Boards at a nightclub in Bowling Green, Kentucky. He took her out for dinner, and afterward they drove to Smith's Grove near Route 68, where they engaged in sex. Sam later confessed that Linda's beauty initially made him reluctant to kill her. However, during intercourse, his violent impulses overtook him. "I didn't really plan on it, but I just did it," he admitted. "Unfortunately, I had desires at this time that were out of control." Sam disposed of Linda's half-naked body in Smith's Grove, where it was discovered 3 days later on May 15th. In September 1981, Sam encountered Patricia Parker, a 30-year-old sex worker, at a bar on 9th Street in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Patricia agreed to travel with Sam and Jean for a while. However, on September 28, 1981, near Hooker, Georgia, Sam murdered Patricia. He rolled her body down a steep hill into a wooded area just off the interstate highway. Her remains were found the same day, but Patricia wasn't identified until October 2020, when Sam's confessions finally connected her to the case. On October 6, 1981, 33-year-old Annie Lee Stewart, a single mother of 3, was last seen visiting her sister at the University Medical Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. As it rained, Sam approached her and offered her a ride home. 5 days later, on October 11th, Annie's body was discovered in the woods, approximately 100 miles northeast, near Grove City. Sam once compared the act of stalking his victims to being like a lion in the jungle. He described his predatory mindset, saying, "We going hunting. I love women so hungrily that I would take what I wanted. I want to eat her. I want to bite her thighs, listen to her beg." Sometime in 1981, Sam murdered another victim. an unidentified black woman estimated to be between 35 and 40 years old in Atlanta, Georgia. Her body was never recovered. On November 19, 1981, Sam returned to Pascagoula, Mississippi, where he encountered 22-year-old Lela Mae McLean. He offered her $50 for sex, and she agreed. At just 5'2", Lela was petite in stature. She suggested they go to her room at Carver Village, but Sam had other plans. To avoid being recognized from his previous attack on Hilda Nelson at Carver Village in 1980, Sam suggested they go to the Shamrock Motel instead. Lela agreed, but her suspicions were piqued when Sam drove past the Shamrock and down a secluded, tree-lined side street. Sensing imminent danger, Lela acted quickly. She grabbed the steering wheel and jerked it to the right while swinging her leg onto the driver's side to press the gas pedal. Her goal was to crash Sam's car into a nearby brick wall. Sam fought back, shoving Lela to the passenger side and slamming on the brakes just in time to avoid a collision. He then lunged at her, grabbing her by the neck and ripping at her clothes. Refusing to go down without a fight, Lela punched Sam repeatedly in the face until her knuckles bled. She then raked his eyes with her long nails, further disorienting him. Overwhelmed by her resistance, Sam released his grip and collapsed into the driver's seat. Lela seized the moment, throwing open the passenger door and sprinting away as fast as she could. Lela ran with everything she had. Reaching the end of the street, she dashed onto the highway, weaving through traffic despite her torn clothes and exposed body. On the other side of the road, a male pedestrian noticed her distress and came to her aid. Sam chose not to pursue Lela and instead returned to collect Jean before fleeing the city. Tragically, Lela decided not to report the attack, fearing that law enforcement wouldn't believe or assist her. On July 10, 1982, Sam and Jean traveled back to Macon County, Georgia. There, Sam abducted 18-year-old Fredonia Smith. Sam later admitted that Fredonia fought back fiercely, nearly escaping. She left several deep scratches on his face and arms during the struggle. Despite her valiant resistance, Sam eventually overpowered Fredonia and strangled her. His confession revealed that her fierce struggle prevented him from carrying out a sexual assault. Sam disposed of Fredonia's body in a cluster of bushes behind a house on Magnolia Street. Her remains were discovered several weeks later by the homeowners while clearing the overgrown yard. Years later, in 2018, Fredonia's brother Eddie expressed his rage, saying, "I'd like to put my hands around his neck and squeeze and let him see how it feels, just how he did to all these women." A month later, on August 8, 1982, Sam and Jean traveled to Ocala, Florida. There, Sam met Rosie Hill, a 21-year-old sex worker and single mother of a 2-year-old child. Originally from Memphis, Tennessee, Rosie was working in Florida to support her child. Eyewitnesses reported seeing Sam offer Rosie $100 for sex. She was reported missing on August 12th, and her body was discovered 4 days later, on August 16th, near a pig pen in the countryside. Eyewitnesses were able to positively identify both Rosie and Sam, leading to his detainment for questioning. However, due to insufficient evidence, authorities were forced to release him. 2 weeks later, Sam and Jean arrived in Houma, Louisiana. On September 1, 1982, Sam murdered 55-year-old Dorothy Richard, leaving her body on the side of Woodland Ranch Road. Her remains were discovered nearly 2 weeks later, on September 14. From Houma, Sam traveled to New Orleans, where he killed 2 more women, 1 white and 1 black. Neither victim was ever identified, and their bodies were never found. Such outcomes were sadly common in Louisiana's swamps, where alligators, humidity, and natural elements quickly eroded evidence. Within days, Sam and Jean had made their way across the southern states, eventually reaching Gainesville, Florida. Along the way, they picked up a teenager named Danny Beckless. Danny assisted Jean with shoplifting from malls and stores, while Sam served as their getaway driver. On September 10, 1982, Sam visited Willie Mae's Beer Tavern in Gainesville, where he began talking to Patricia Ann Mount. Patricia was a 26-year-old woman with a mental disability and an IQ of around 40. She lived in a nearby care home. Sam later referred to Patricia as one of my bar girls, adding, "She had a long face, a long pretty nose, and a long neck, so I chose her." Eyewitnesses reported seeing Sam leave the bar with Patricia, driving away in a brown Pinto station wagon. Sam later confessed, "We stopped at a liquor store. I bought us some wine, and we went back to the car and drove out to a big cow pasture." Sam later describes his actions with chilling detail. "As soon as I felt her neck, I got excited. The bones in her throat were what thrilled me. I had to do it. I squeezed her neck. After it was over, I leaned back for days, just like a lion after a meal." The following morning, Sam returned to the Star Motel, where he, Gene Dorsey, and Danny Beckless were staying in Gainesville. Gene and Danny were still asleep. Hours later, when Danny went to the car, he discovered feces smeared across the back seat. Danny realized that Patricia had soiled herself during Sam's attack. Furious, Danny confronted Sam, demanding, "What the hell happened?" In response, Sam casually boasted about harming sex workers. However, Patricia wasn't a sex worker, just a vulnerable woman with the mental capacity of a child, lured by alcohol and manipulation. Danny was disturbed by Sam's behavior but chose to stay silent. Later that day, Gene cleaned the mess from the car's back seat without asking questions. On September 12th, Patricia's naked body was discovered in a hay field in Forest Grove, a rural area 20 miles northwest of Gainesville. Investigators found several of Sam's hairs on her body and began searching for the man witnesses had seen leaving Willie Mae's Beer Tavern with Patricia 2 nights earlier. By September 13th, however, Sam had already fled the state. Despite his escape, Gainesville police linked the description of Patricia Mount's killer to a man known as Sam McDowell, who had been questioned in Ocala in August regarding the murder of Rosie Hill. Gainesville and Ocala police issued a BOLO for a man matching Sam's description, driving a brown Pinto station wagon. Meanwhile, by September 15, 1982, Sam, Gene, and Danny had traveled back to Pascagoula, Mississippi. Returning to Pascagoula was a reckless move, as this was the same town where Sam had previously failed to kill Hilda Nelson and Layla McClain. Despite the risk, that evening, Sam went to the King William Hotel, where he picked up 22-year-old sex worker Melinda Lepre, who had been soliciting clients outside with other women. Melinda was the mother of a 3-week-old baby. Witnesses, including other sex workers, later recalled seeing her get into a brown Pinto station wagon driven by a black man. According to Sam's confession, "Me and her rode around to find a place to hook up. I chose a graveyard. I reached down, wrapped my hands around her throat, and squeezed until she went limp and died. I killed her in a graveyard," Sam continued. "She died before I even realized it. I got carried away. But I meant to do it eventually. I meant it because it felt good." Melinda's boyfriend, Billy Hampton, reported her missing the following morning. However, police dismissed his concerns, telling him to wait 24 hours and suggesting that sex workers often move to other cities. When Melinda didn't return after 24 hours, police opened a missing persons case and began their investigation. They interviewed other sex workers who provided a description of the man she had left with and mentioned the brown Pinto station wagon. 2.5 weeks later, on October 4, 1982, a groundskeeper at the Gaultier family cemetery discovered Melinda's body in a ditch at the property's edge, covered in brambles. Sam had taken flowers from a nearby grave and placed them on top of her body. Although Melinda's body was badly decomposed, the coroner determined that she had died from manual strangulation. This conclusion was based on fractures in the cartilage of her neck and disarticulation of her hyoid bone. The discovery of Melinda's body intensified the investigation. Pascagoula police soon found the BOLO issued by Gainesville and Ocala authorities for a black man driving a brown Pinto, who was suspected in the murders of Patricia Mount and Rosie Hill. The cases bore strikingly similar methods, and the search was on. Almost 2 months later, on November 24, 1982, Sam, Jean, and Danny were arrested for shoplifting in Gulfport, Mississippi. Pascagoula police immediately took notice, as the driver of the brown Pinto matched the description of the man last seen with Melinda Lepre. Sam was brought in for questioning, where he denied being in Pascagoula at the time of Melinda's murder. However, a search of his Pinto uncovered receipts from the Imperial Motel in Pascagoula dated around September 15, the time of the killing. Despite the evidence, Sam stuck to his strategy of complete denial. The police faced a significant hurdle. Melinda's body was too decomposed to yield much forensic evidence, and Jean had thoroughly cleaned the back seat of Sam's car. This left them with no direct physical evidence to tie Sam to the crime. With no solid evidence, it seemed unlikely that Melinda's case would make it to trial, let alone result in a conviction. However, Pascagoula police soon connected Sam's description to the assault on Hilda Nelson at Carver Village from July 31, 1980. By this time, Hilda's mother had discovered her work as a sex worker. In light of this, Hilda updated her statement, revealing that Sam had offered her money for sex before attacking her in her room. Soon after, police received reports from other sex workers that Leila McLean had been assaulted by a man matching Sam Little's description on November 19, 1981. Both Hilda Nelson and Leila McLean identified Sam in a police lineup. Based on this evidence, Pascagoula police charged Sam with the first-degree murder of Melinda Lepre and the attempted murders of Hilda Nelson and Leila McLean. Their strategy was clear. Even if the murder charge didn't stick, they aimed to secure a conviction for the attempted murders. Both Leila and Hilda were determined to testify in front of the grand jury in 1983. Without access to transportation, they walked several miles to the courthouse. At the time of the testimony, Hilda was 8 months pregnant. In court, Leila appeared defiant and fiery, while Hilda was so overcome with fear upon seeing Sam that she lost control of her bladder. Despite their efforts, neither Hilda nor Leila was given the chance to testify. The grand jury quickly refused to indict Sam on any charges, citing a lack of physical evidence. Additionally, the grand jury deemed both women unreliable witnesses due to their criminal records and histories of drug use and sex work. As a result, all charges against Sam were dropped. Adding insult to injury, neither Hilda nor Leila was offered transportation home. Likewise, Ocala police opted not to pursue charges against Sam for the murder of Rosie Hill, citing insufficient evidence. However, Gainesville police chose to move forward with their case against Sam for the murder of Patricia Mount. Several eyewitnesses from Willie Mae's Beer Tavern reported seeing Sam leave with Patricia in a brown Pinto. 3 of those witnesses later identified Sam in a lineup. Additionally, investigators discovered hairs resembling Sam's on Patricia's body. Police also questioned Danny Beckless, who revealed that Sam left the Star Motel at 7 p.m. on September 10, the night Patricia Mount was murdered. Danny further testified that Sam returned the next morning with feces smeared across the backseat of his car and openly bragged about harming sex workers. On July 19, 1983, after the Pascagoula charges against Sam Little were dropped, he was extradited to Gainesville. There, a grand jury indicted him for the murder of Patricia Mount, and the case proceeded to trial in January 1984. Key witness Danny Beckles disappeared and couldn't testify. The prosecution relied on 3 eyewitnesses who had seen Patricia Mount enter Sam Little's car. While they weren't sex workers, their reputation as heavy drinkers led the jury to question their credibility. Sam admitted to being at Willie Mae's Beer Tavern on the night of the murder, but denied ever speaking to or leaving with Patricia Mount. Jean Dorsey, freshly acquitted of her November shoplifting charge, came to court dressed in her best Sunday clothes. She provided Sam with an alibi, claiming he had returned to the Star Motel by 8 p.m. hours before Patricia Mount left the tavern. Jean's sweet, church-going demeanor made a strong impression on the jury, painting her as a harmless old lady. Additionally, since DNA testing wasn't yet in use, the hairs found on Patricia Mount's body couldn't be conclusively linked to Sam Little. It took the jury less than half an hour to acquit Sam Little, citing reasonable doubt. This failure to convict marked a turning point, one that would seal the fate of many more women in the years to come. In the early hours of May 12, 1984, Sam Little picked up 26-year-old Willie Mae Bivens, a sex worker, outside a nightclub in Tennessee, Florida. He murdered her and abandoned her body in a vacant lot along the Shadeville Highway. A year later, police wrongly accused a drifter, Eddie Daniel Harris, who had been seen talking to Bivens that night. Harris was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 4 years in prison, while the real killer, Sam Little, continued to roam free. Before leaving Florida in 1984, Sam Little took the lives of 2 unidentified black women, one in Fort Myers and the other in Tampa Bay. From there, he and Jean Dorsey traveled to Savannah, Georgia. In Savannah, Sam met 23-year-old Frances Campbell at a bar on Montgomery Street. After luring her into his car, he strangled her and discarded her body on a pile of construction debris, where her remains were discovered a year later. While still in Savannah, Sam killed another black woman in her 20s, whose identity remains unknown. Their next stop was Atlanta, where Sam claimed another life, a young black woman between 23 and 25 years old. The pair then traveled north to Cleveland, Ohio. Between May and June 1984, Sam met 21-year-old Mary Jo Payton at a bar. After killing her, he left her body in the stairwell of an abandoned factory. Authorities dismissed her death as a drug overdose due to her history of addiction, never realizing it was another of Sam Little's murders. Next, the duo headed to Columbus, Ohio, where they met 25-year-old sex worker Linda Bennett at a strip club. The 2 men met at a strip club and started sex. Sam described her as a dishwater blonde with a bob haircut, standing about 5 feet tall and weighing 130 pounds. He and Jean offered her a ride to Miami, but their journey took a dark turn. After stopping in Cincinnati to party, they crossed into Kentucky. Linda spotted a music festival near Covington that she wanted to attend, but Sam had other plans. He drove her into the hills, murdered her, and left her body hidden in dense vegetation. From Kentucky, Sam and Jean drove south to Mobile, Alabama. On August 10, 1984, Sam picked up 2 sex workers, 23-year-old Hannah Mae Bonner and 34-year-old Ida Mae Campbell. The pair was last seen with Sam that evening, stopping to buy cocaine from a local dealer. The following day, Hannah Mae's body was found in a ditch along a country road south of Mobile. 3 weeks later, Ida Mae's remains were discovered near Halls Mills Creek, only a few miles from where Hannah was found. Following their time in Alabama, Sam and Jean traveled west to San Bernardino, California. There, Sam targeted an unidentified black woman in her late teens or early 20s. After strangling her to death, he engaged in necrophilia before abandoning her body on a hillside near the highway. From San Bernardino, the pair traveled 2 hours south to San Diego. On the night of September 27, 1984, Sam encountered 22-year-old Lori Barras walking downtown, heading to a drug dealer's apartment. He abducted her and drove her to an illegal dump site near Market Street, where he assaulted and asphyxiated her. Believing Lori was dead, Sam dumped her body and left. However, Lori had survived and managed to stagger to a payphone to call a friend for help. After recovering, she went to the police and reported the assault. She did not mention that she'd previously worked as a sex worker, in case it would result in the police taking her complaint less seriously. The police issued a bolo for a black man in his 40s or 50s, around 6'1" and 230 pounds, driving a dark-colored Thunderbird. On October 25, 1984, Sam Little picked up 23-year-old sex worker Tanya Jackson at a gay bar in downtown San Diego. Offering her $20 for sex, he drove her to the same dump site where he had assaulted Lori Barras the previous month. Once there, Sam forced Tanya onto the floor of the back seat, brutally beat her and choked her until she was unconscious. However, before he could finish the attack, a patrol car spotted his Thunderbird and illuminated it with a blinding spotlight. The officers spotted movement in the back seat and approached with their weapons drawn. They ordered the man to exit the vehicle, and Sam Little complied, pulling up his pants as he got out. He introduced himself as Sam McDowell and claimed he was having make-up sex with his girlfriend after an argument. The officers noticed scratches on his face and blood on his shirt. While one officer frisked Sam, the other checked the vehicle and found Tanya Jackson, naked and unconscious, lying on the floor with blood on her face and bruises on her neck. The officers handcuffed Sam and placed him in the back of the patrol car. It took several minutes to revive Tanya Jackson. Once conscious, she stated that Sam had attempted to rape her. Tanya was taken to a hospital for treatment, and Sam Little was officially arrested on charges of kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted murder. At the station, Sam changed his story. He claimed that Tanya Jackson had tried to swindle him out of his money, and he had only restrained her to get what he paid for. According to Sam, Jackson attacked him first, and he acted in self-defense. He added dismissively, "The doctor won't find any proof of rape, just bruises on her neck where my hands were. I didn't rape her, I just gave her what she deserved. Is she gonna make it?" Sam hadn't had the chance to sexually assault Tanya or leave definitive evidence, so the only tangible proof was her testimony and the bruises around her neck. Her nakedness, though damning, aligned with Sam's story about a dispute over money. Despite this, the charges of kidnapping and attempted murder appeared to be solid. The police also connected Tanya's case to the attack on Lori Barris, who was brought to the station to identify Sam in a lineup. Lori immediately recognized him but wanted more. She asked each person in the lineup to say, "I love it when you swallow," forcing the assailant to hear her voice from the other side of the glass. It was unmistakable who she was accusing. Tanya Jackson was officially charged with the kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted murder of Lori Barris as well. The cases of Barris and Tanya Jackson were combined and brought to trial in March 1985, with the hope that the two testimonies would strengthen the prosecution's case. However, issues arose almost immediately. Tanya Jackson struggled to testify effectively. Her lack of education, the toll of years of drug abuse, and her nervous demeanor made her testimony less convincing to the jury. Being a sex worker also worked against her, as jurors often viewed such witnesses with suspicion. Lori Barras, in contrast, was articulate and appeared to be a strong witness. However, her nerves betrayed her on the stand. Under cross-examination, she had to admit her history of drug use and her previous work as a sex worker, which weakened her credibility in the eyes of the jury. Meanwhile, Sam maintained his claim that Tanya had attacked him in a dispute over money, and he had acted in self-defense. He outright denied ever meeting Lori Barris. Adding to the defense's case, Jean Dorsey appeared in court and provided Sam with an alibi for the night of Lori Barris's attack. Her performance as a harmless elderly woman worked on the jury. The trial ended with a hung jury. Prosecutors sought a retrial, but Tanya Jackson had disappeared, making her unavailable to testify. Without her, the case was too weak to proceed. A plea deal was arranged, and Sam pled guilty to a lesser charge of assault. He received a 4-year sentence, but served less than 2. By February 1st, 1987, Samuel Little was back on the streets. Following his release from prison, 46-year-old Sam Little returned to Los Angeles, where he reunited with Jean Dorsey. By this point, Jean was 74 and in declining health. They lived in various rundown homes and apartments in South Central, relying on government welfare and Jean's modest Social Security payments to scrape by. To supplement their income, they revived their shoplifting operation, with Jean selling stolen clothing and jewelry at bargain prices to locals in the city's seedy underbelly. Sam hadn't held a legitimate job in years and had no intention of changing that now. Despite their limited means, Sam always found a way to fund his vices, keeping himself supplied with alcohol, drugs, and, most importantly, a car. The car was essential, as his violent urges had not diminished during his time in prison. Reflecting on his actions later, Sam admitted, "When I got out on parole, I went out and killed 2 women in one night. I just couldn't stop. I'd drive around, pick up prostitutes, do what I wanted, strangle them, and leave them." The two women Sam killed that night remain unidentified, with little more known than Sam's admission that they were black. 2 months later, on April 12, 1987, Sam drove to San Bernardino, where he encountered 28-year-old Sonia Colette Austin. Sonia was a devoted housewife, married with 4 children ranging in age from 8 years to just 17 months. Despite her role as a loving mother, she became Sam's next victim, murdered in cold blood. On June 13, 1987, Sam was back in Los Angeles, where he met 41-year-old Carol Alford. Carol wasn't a sex worker, but she struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction. Sam lured her in with the promise of cocaine. After spending a few hours together, he brutally beat and strangled her in the backseat of his car. He discarded Carol's body in a residential alley on East 27th Street in South Central. Carol's body was discovered the next morning, partially undressed, with traces of semen on her clothing. Unbeknownst to Sam, forensic science had advanced during his years in prison. By 1986, DNA profiling had started being used in criminal investigations. However, Sam's compulsion to strangling women while simultaneously gratifying himself was such a core part of his method that he wasn't about to stop, even if it meant leaving behind potentially incriminating evidence. Sam once reflected on his actions with chilling honesty. "Some things that I desire are disgusting. I see that woman with the big ass and the big thighs and the big titties, winking her eyes at me. What I wanted all my life? Women. To hold them and touch them. I couldn't get all that. They didn't want to see me, so I took them, made them mine, took them forever and tagged them." Sam lives alone. Will have to endure the hard truth to live through. I and tagged them myself. While Sam's victims occasionally fell outside his usual preference, this was typically by chance. His targets were almost always society's most vulnerable: sex workers, drug addicts, and individuals with mental health issues. Those whose deaths were less likely to spark widespread concern or prompt thorough investigations. The grim reality of Los Angeles during this time, rife with over 60,000 homeless individuals, 1,15,000 sex workers, and countless drug addicts, provided a horrifyingly fertile hunting ground for Sam Little. Following Carol Alford's murder, Sam claimed 2 more victims in 1987, both unidentified black women. He remembered little about them, estimating one to be around 19 and referring to the other, who he believed was around 50, as Granny. These 2 women, along with 2 other unidentified victims from earlier in the year, were never officially identified. It's possible that their bodies were discovered but lost amidst the overwhelming number of unsolved cases and unidentified remains regularly found in Los Angeles during that era. In Los Angeles, the death of a homeless person, sex worker, or drug addict rarely made headlines, and the sheer volume of such cases overwhelmed law enforcement. Investigations were often cursory, and resources spread too thin. The scale of the issue highlighted a harsh truth. More resources and officers were desperately needed to address the epidemic of violence in the city, but systemic neglect left countless victims without justice. In 1988, Jean Dorsey died of a brain aneurysm, passing away without ever facing justice. Jean had been deeply complicit in Sam's crimes, aiding in the disposal of evidence and providing him with alibis on more than one occasion. According to accounts from Lucy Maduro, Jean herself may have committed murder years earlier, allegedly shooting a boyfriend and his lover when she was a young woman in St. Louis. Jean's death marked a turning point for Sam, as it stripped him of a vital source of financial support. He became more transient, at times living out of his car, and his drug use shifted to cheaper, more destructive crack cocaine. The years of substance abuse and a transient lifestyle began to take a visible toll, transforming Sam from a once intimidating figure into a prematurely aged drifter. Once a strapping and charismatic figure in the bars of the 1970s and 80s, Sam Little's appearance deteriorated sharply as drug use and transient living took hold. Jean's death further exacerbated this decline, leaving parts of his later activities in the 1980s hazy. Sam mentioned killing an unidentified black woman he estimated to be around 24 years old in Monroe, Louisiana, sometime in 1987. However, he later speculated that this might have occurred in the early 90s. Sam also claimed that he traveled to Phoenix, Arizona in 1988, where he killed an unidentified Hispanic woman. Strangely, he later suggested this could have occurred as late as 1996. Given the sheer number of murders he committed, it's not entirely surprising that his memory of exact dates and details became muddled. For someone like Sam, whose crimes spanned decades, the passage of time likely blurred many of the specifics. What remains clear is that on August 14, 1989, Sam Little crossed paths with 35-year-old sex worker Audrey Nelson in a downtown Los Angeles hotel. They agreed on a price for sex and used heroin together. What came next was tragically inevitable. In Sam's own words, "I killed her back behind a restaurant. I strangled her to death. That's what happened. I don't know who she was. I didn't know anything about her." Audrey Nelson's story mirrored that of countless others, drawn to the allure of Los Angeles, only to be consumed by its darker underbelly. Once a promising young woman, Audrey's life spiraled into drug addiction, marked by abusive relationships, hospital visits, and relentless struggle. She resorted to sex work to fuel her addiction. Audrey had a daughter, Pearl, who was taken away by Child Protective Services, along with 2 other children, each removed at birth. In 1989, Pearl was 13 years old and had recently reconnected with her mother, giving Audrey newfound hope. She had begun to turn her life around, but fate intervened when Sam Little crossed her path. Audrey's lifeless body was discovered on the morning of August 14, curled in the fetal position in a dumpster behind a Chinese restaurant on East 7th Street. Audrey's body was found nude from the waist down, bearing evidence of a violent struggle. She had fought fiercely against her attacker, leaving traces of Sam's skin under her fingernails. Just weeks later, on September 9, 1989, a 9-year-old boy stumbled upon another grim discovery: a woman's body in an abandoned auto body shop on Ascot Avenue in South Central Los Angeles. Inside the abandoned auto body shop, the boy discovered the body of 46-year-old Guadalupe Apodaca sprawled on a filthy mattress. Guadalupe was a sex worker and a drug addict, but she was also a mother to 2 sons. Her body bore signs of severe physical abuse. Bruises covered her face, back, thighs, and buttocks, and there were extensive marks of strangulation around her neck. She was naked from the waist down and had suffered brutal sexual assault, with evidence of semen left on her body. Despite a brief investigation, the lack of leads caused her case to turn cold. By the close of the 1980s, Samuel Little had murdered an estimated 69 to 71 women, depending on the timeline of his alleged Monroe and Phoenix victims. Even compared to infamous killers like Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, or Harvey Donald, known as the Angel of Death, Little had established himself as one of the deadliest serial killers in modern American history. Yet, as the 1990s approached, Samuel Little remained free, leaving his reign of terror far from over. As the 1990s began, Samuel Little continued his cross-country spree, though he frequently returned to Los Angeles as a base. On July 6, 1990, in Memphis, Tennessee, Little encountered 30-year-old sex worker Zena Marie Jones at a motel. He lured her into his car, offering money, and drove her to the Mississippi River. There he began his ritual of assault and strangulation, prolonging her suffering for his own twisted gratification. However, when a police patrol car passed nearby, Little panicked and hastily killed Zena, later lamenting the lost opportunity to enjoy his victim further. He discarded her body in the Mississippi River, where a fisherman discovered her remains on July 28th, washed ashore on the Arkansas side. Tragically, Zena Marie Jones remained a Jane Doe for 32 years. On June 10, 1991, back in Los Angeles, Samuel Little encountered 34-year-old Alice Denise Duval outside a motel. Reflecting on his victim, he remarked, "The dark, skinny black girl. She was pretty, but you could tell she was going down fast. She wore glasses, looked real neat like a school teacher, but she was a whore." Little drove Alice down Central Avenue, taking a meandering route across Long Beach until they reached the coast. They parked near an overpass, shared conversation, and smoked crack. What began as consensual sex soon turned fatal when Little placed his hands around her neck, as he described it. Only then did she struggle in my arms. She squirmed around and was pulling at my hands, and we were looking into each other's eyes until she didn't breathe no more. She was gone. She was dead. Then I just did what I wanted to her. I ran my hands through her hair and smelled her hair. I was kissing her, holding her. Once he was satisfied, Sam discarded Alice's lifeless body on a patch of grass beneath the overpass. Her remains were discovered by passers-by the following morning, yet her identity remained unknown for decades. The sheer volume of bodies found across Los Angeles obscured her case among countless others. Alice was only connected to Sam Little's crimes 3 years after his confession, thanks to investigative efforts by true crime writer Gillian Lauren rather than the LAPD. Before departing the city, one that Sam called a shithole built on broken dreams and discarded corpses, he took another victim. This time, it was an unidentified black woman whom he estimated to be around 20 to 22 years old. Her fate, like so many others, was lost amidst the chaos and neglect of the city's forgotten souls. In late August 1991, Sam Little traveled to Cleveland, Ohio, where he encountered 32-year-old Rose Evans. He offered her a ride, and she accepted, unaware of the danger she faced. Sam drove her to a desolate lot on East 39th Street, where he strangled her and concealed her body beneath a pile of discarded tires. Just days later, on August 24, a passerby stumbled upon her remains, yet another life extinguished by Little's insatiable appetite for murder. After leaving Cleveland, Sam made his way to Akron, Ohio. On September 8, 1991, he met 34-year-old Roberta Tanderich, a mother of 2. Like so many others, she fell prey to Sam's deadly charm. He murdered Roberta and abandoned her body in the woods near Firestone Metro Park. It wasn't until September 30 that her remains were discovered, leaving her daughters to grapple with the devastating loss. In 1992, Sam Little returned to Los Angeles, where his killing spree continued unabated. Among his victims that year were 2 unidentified black women whose ages remain unknown, and a Hispanic woman whom Little estimated to be around 25 years old. These nameless victims vanished into the shadows of a city that seemed to swallow their stories whole. By late April 1992, Sam Little found himself in North Little Rock, Arkansas.
Little Rock. Tell me what that girl looked like.
Oh man, I loved her. I forget her name. Oh wait, I think it was Ruth.
Okay.
She was a heavy set, big old yellow hair, and had buck teeth. It had a gap between the teeth, that's what it was.
Passing a crack house, he noticed a group of women smoking on the porch. Among them, one caught his attention. A black woman with a heavy-set frame, buck teeth, and a gap between them. She stood about 5'7" and weighed approximately 170 to 180 pounds. Sam guessed she was 24 years old and later recalled that her name might have been Ruth. Sam and Ruth spent 3 days together, indulging in crack cocaine and shoplifting from stores around North Little Rock.
We stayed together 2 days or more. I think it was about 3 days. We was going shoplifting. We went to Sears. We went to Kroger's, and that's where I got busted.
Mm-hmm.
Their spree came to a halt when Sam was caught stealing from a Kroger supermarket and temporarily detained. Ruth, having no other place to go, stayed in Sam's car, parked in the Kroger lot. Eventually, the store manager called the police to have her removed. Surprisingly, the charges against Sam were dropped, and he was allowed to retrieve both Ruth and his car. After his release, Sam picked Ruth up and drove her about 10 miles north of Little Rock, stopping near a secluded cornfield. Under the guise of privacy, he parked beside a heap of decaying corn stalks. There, Sam unleashed his dark intentions, strangling Ruth to death despite her earlier act of loyalty.
So we was headed toward We went to that place where Walmart's original store been. I whipped off the road and back into that little woods. It was a cornfield back there. I pulled through it, and on the other side of the cornfield was a trash pile. I parked the car facing out where I could see anybody coming in. So I pulled her out of the car. She's too big for me to carry her. So I just pulled her out of the car and laid on that trash that was lit.
Her lifeless body was left on the rotting pile, another casualty of Sam's relentless spree. Sam's next stop was Gulfport, Mississippi, where he spent the evening of December 7, 1992, at the Flamingo Club. There, he encountered 27-year-old Alice Denise Taylor, known as Tina. A mother of 5, struggling with addiction and trying to turn her life around, Tina became the perfect prey for Sam, who used her vulnerability against her. Luring her into his car with the promise of drugs, he murdered her and hid her body beneath a pile of discarded car tires in a vacant lot. Her remains were discovered 4 days later, on December 11th. Not satisfied with a single victim that night, Sam returned to the Flamingo Club and lured 19-year-old Tracy Lynn Johnson into his car. Driving her to a remote illegal dump site along U.S. Highway 49, he carried out his heinous routine, strangling her and discarding her body among the trash. Her remains were discovered a month later, on January 3, 1993. By May 4, 1993, Sam was staying at the Skylark Motel in Perry, Florida. One evening, he attended a nearby party where he spotted 19-year-old Ruby Lane. Using his well-practiced charm, he convinced her to join him in his car. Tragically, Ruby became another victim, strangled and left in a forest near Greenville. Her remains were left undiscovered until November 11, 2000, and it wasn't until 2014, thanks to advancements in DNA testing, that Ruby's identity was finally confirmed. In the early hours of August 7, 1993, Sam Little prowled the streets of Lubbock, Texas. Outside the Rose Hotel, he encountered 37-year-old sex worker Bobby Ann Fields Wilson and coaxed her into his yellow Cadillac Eldorado. Witnesses recalled seeing Bobby Ann enter the vehicle, but failed to catch the license plate or properly identify the driver. The next day, on August 8th, a family out for a walk near Keel Avenue stumbled upon her lifeless body, and she had been severely beaten and strangled, marking yet another victim of Sam's violent spree. On his return journey to Los Angeles, Sam made a stop in Las Vegas. Strolling along Owens Avenue, he encountered a black woman he believed to be a 40-year-old sex worker, standing about 5'5" and weighing around 120 pounds, wearing a long wig. In a surreal twist, the woman waved over a young man Sam assumed was her son, likely in his early 20s. The young man casually greeted Sam, shaking his hand and asking how he was doing, an eerie moment before the encounter turned deadly. Day, and the unidentified woman settled on a price and drove off into the night. Somewhere on the outskirts of Las Vegas, on a lonely road leading toward Searchlight, he carried out his dark intentions. Her lifeless body was discarded down a steep incline, swallowed by the thick bushes below. To this day, her remains have never been discovered, and the tragedy remains a haunting mystery, unmatched to any missing persons case. By January 12, 1994, Sam Little had made his way to Odessa, Texas. There, he crossed paths with 38-year-old Denise Christie Brothers, a struggling heroin addict who had tragically been separated from her children. Sam offered her a ride and eventually drove to a motel. In the parking lot, they were confronted by Denise's boyfriend, Elton, who made it clear he didn't approve of her going with other black men. Sam Little smoothed things over with Elton by offering to buy them all heroin, a gesture that quickly dissolved any tension. With the trio seemingly on good terms, Elton eventually left, leaving Denise alone with Sam. As the night deepened, Sam and Denise resumed their conversation, ultimately agreeing to go somewhere private. While Denise suggested the dilapidated motel she called home, Sam proposed a drive instead, a decision that sealed her fate. Their drive led them to a desolate alley off South Van Street. As Denise prepared to fulfill their agreement, Sam suddenly lunged at her, gripping her neck with one hand while pleasuring himself with the other. Denise fought back, clawing at his face in desperation, but Sam retaliated with brutal punches, leaving her dazed. As the life drained from her body, he chillingly kissed her and wiped away her tears, savoring every moment of his twisted fantasy. 3 weeks later, on February 2, 1994, a truck driver made a grim discovery. Denise Christie Brothers' lifeless body lay discarded in a pile of trash on a vacant lot near South Van Street. Authorities quickly identified her as she was known to law enforcement. The coroner confirmed her cause of death, homicide by strangulation, prompting a citywide investigation. Even the Texas Rangers, including a determined investigator named James Holland, were brought in, a name that would later play a pivotal role in bringing Sam Little to justice. Despite his earlier encounter with Sam, Denise's boyfriend Elton failed to identify the man who had been with her that fateful night. The Odessa police, unable to track down anyone matching Sam's description, hit a dead end. By then, Sam was already far from Texas, continuing his murderous spree. On February 24, 1994, just 3 weeks after Denise's body was found, Sam abducted 26-year-old sex worker Jolanta Jones in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He ended her life and left her near Port Road on the town's outskirts. With no visible bruising on her throat, Jolanta Jones's death was tragically misclassified as a drug overdose. 2 years later, on January 31, 1996, Sam Little struck again in the small town of Opelousas, Louisiana. Melissa Thomas had left her house for a simple errand to buy cigarettes at a nearby gas station. As she crossed a cemetery shortcut, Sam trailed her from a distance, his predatory instincts in full swing. Without warning, he tackled her to the ground and swiftly strangled her. Unlike his usual patterns, there was no extended assault, no gratification sought, just a cold and efficient murder in broad daylight. Melissa's lifeless body was discovered hours later, lying face down in the graveyard, a chilling testament to Sam's growing brazenness. Just 2 days after Melissa's murder, Sam found his next victim 125 miles away in Houma, Louisiana. He encountered 40-year-old Daisy McGuire, a woman whose addiction had eroded her once stable life. Reflecting on her, Sam later said, "Her neck was slim like a swan. She had the prettiest neck you'd ever lay your eyes on, so I chose her." Daisy, who had been a loving wife and mother a decade earlier, saw her life unravel when she became addicted to crack around 1986. By the time Sam found her, she was wandering the streets at night, often preaching semi-coherently from a Bible she clung to like a lifeline. For Sam, Daisy's vulnerability and physical features made her his next target. Sam recalled his meeting with Daisy with chilling indifference. "A black dude introduced me to her and told me that he didn't give a fuck about her, and I said if y'all don't want her, I'll take her." He and Daisy spent 2 or 3 days together, during which their interactions turned sour over an argument about $20 she wanted for crack cocaine. The next day, he picked her up again. That morning, parked near a tool business, Daisy wore what Sam described as a sexy outfit. He claimed she loved teasing, "look but don't touch," but didn't know her limits. When Sam grabbed her neck, Daisy's realization came too late. "I got off," but she didn't. On February 6, 1996, Daisy McGuire's lifeless body was found stuffed beneath a corrugated steel building in Houma's industrial district. Her face had been brutally beaten, leaving her unrecognizable. Authorities had to rely on her tattoos for identification. Despite clear evidence of foul play, the coroner failed to detect signs of strangulation, attributing her death to an overdose and hypothermia. The decision to classify the case this way underscores the indifference toward the lives of vulnerable women like Daisy, a mistake Sam Little exploited to remain undetected. Daisy's fate exemplified the systemic neglect Sam relied on to evade capture. "Stupid-ass police, they didn't care," Sam later confessed. "I picked up hoes and I picked up bitches. Real hoes. These girls, I killed them. They're not women of position." Emboldened by society's apathy, Sam returned to Los Angeles and resumed his killing spree. During the latter half of 1996, he murdered 3 more unidentified black women, all approximately 25 years old. He nicknamed 2 of them Sheila and T-Money. In addition to these victims, Sam also claimed another life that year, a 25-year-old white woman, petite at 5 feet tall and 110 pounds. According to Sam, he killed her in the bathroom of an abandoned house. Afterward, he attempted to sodomize her corpse, but when his body failed to respond, he dumped her lifeless form in the bathtub and walked away. Like so many of Sam's victims, her identity remains unknown. In 1997, Sam struck again, murdering another unidentified white woman in Phoenix, Arizona. Her age, like her identity, remains unknown. Following this, Sam's killing spree began to wane. At 57 years old, his health had deteriorated after decades of substance abuse. Weakened and wary of physical confrontations with younger women who might resist, Sam transitioned to a less risky lifestyle. He relied on shoplifting and selling counterfeit goods, skills he'd picked up from Gene Dorsey, and lived out of an RV. Still, the insatiable hunger that had defined his life remained, simmering beneath the surface. Sam's final known victim was 46-year-old Carol Ann Stevens, a mother whose son had recently graduated from university. It was the summer of 2005, and Sam had settled temporarily in Decatur, Alabama. Over 2 weeks, he built a rapport with Carol, gaining her trust. Feeling safe, she entered his RV, unaware of the predator lurking behind his congenial demeanor. Sam drove Carol 115 miles west to Tupelo, Mississippi. According to his account, the journey was consensual, at least at first. But something snapped when they stopped in front of a Walmart. In a sudden burst of rage, Sam strangled Carol to death. He discarded her body on a roadside in Lee County, Mississippi, ending a decades-long spree of terror. By this time, Sam was 65 years old, and his killing days were nearly over. At 65, the age many retire, Sam Little finally stopped killing. Though his murderous impulses persisted, the physical toll of age and years of drug abuse made continuing his spree too risky. Instead, Sam lived a transient life, occasionally arrested for petty shoplifting. Despite claiming at least 93 victims between 1970 and 2005, the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history managed to remain undetected for years. For the countless families mourning their lost daughters, justice seemed like an impossibility. By 2001, advancements in DNA profiling technology had revolutionized forensic science. Recognizing the potential to solve previously unsolvable crimes, the Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery and Homicide Division created a special unit. This team, tasked with tackling the staggering backlog of cold cases older than 5 years, faced a Herculean challenge. The hope was that DNA fingerprints, stored in newly established state and national databases, could finally link killers to their forgotten victims. Los Angeles alone had over 6,000 unresolved cases, the majority involving the city's most vulnerable, homeless individuals, sex workers, and drug addicts. In response, the Cold Case Special Section, CCSS, was formed. Their mission, to give a voice to the silenced, regardless of their social standing. Inspired by Michael Connelly's crime novels, the unit adopted an unofficial motto: everybody counts or nobody counts. Yet solving these cases was painstaking work, requiring patience and dedication in the face of overwhelming odds. The wheels of justice turned slowly. 8 years after the Cold Case Special Section was founded, on May 6, 2009, investigators revisited the case of Guadalupe Apodaca. Semen found on her body, discarded on a filthy mattress in an abandoned garage in 1989, was submitted for DNA testing. Nearly a year later, on March 1, 2010, evidence from another 1989 murder was processed. skin cells beneath the fingernails of Audrey Nelson, who had fought for her life before being left in a dumpster. Both cases would soon lead detectives to a chilling discovery. In 2010, Detective Mitzi Roberts joined the Cold Case Special Section. Her journey into law enforcement was unconventional. A former bartender and restaurant manager in the San Fernando Valley, Mitzi had often engaged in conversations with police officers who frequented her establishments. Her fascination with true crime and serial killers was evident, and it wasn't long before her customers in blue suggested she consider a career change. Mitzi took their advice and went on to become one of LAPD's most dedicated detectives. The San Francisco Press reported. Mitzi Roberts officially joined the LAPD in March 1995, starting her career investigating gang activity in the San Fernando Valley. She later worked the grueling night shift in the notorious Rampart Division, a hotbed of gang violence and crime. Surviving such a high-pressure environment required toughness and resilience, qualities Mitzi possessed in abundance. By 2000, Mitzi had risen through the ranks and was transferred to the Homicide Division. A decade later, she joined the Cold Case Special Section as a seasoned detective, armed with a wealth of experience and a reputation for tenacity. Among the cases that crossed her desk was one of the most infamous in American history, the unsolved Black Dahlia murder of Elizabeth Short. On April 26, 2012, after years of waiting, a breakthrough arrived. DNA testing conclusively linked semen from Guadalupe Apodaca's murder and skin cells from Audrey Nelson's case to a single individual, Samuel Little. His DNA was already in the national database, and this connection opened a chilling new chapter in the investigation. The DNA match made it highly probable that Samuel Little was responsible for the murders of Apodaca and Nelson. However, it wasn't the open and shut case one might expect. Both victims were sex workers, and a clever defense attorney could argue that Little had engaged with the women consensually or been involved in unrelated altercations, leaving the door open for another culprit to commit the murders after he left. Investigators needed more than DNA to secure a conviction. They had to establish a pattern of behavior and gather circumstantial evidence proving Little was a predator targeting vulnerable women. But there was a significant obstacle. Samuel Little had vanished. By 2012, Samuel Little was a ghost. Homeless and constantly on the move, he slept in his car and drifted between shelters and camps across the country, making him nearly impossible to track. Mitzi Roberts delved into Samuel Little's extensive arrest record, which spanned 24 states and included charges ranging from theft and shoplifting to sexual assault and attempted murder. One case stood out. In 1976, Little had received a mere 3-month sentence for what was blatantly the rape and attempted murder of Pamela K. Smith. It was a miscarriage of justice that left Mitzi seething. In 1983, Little had dodged justice yet again, avoiding convictions for the murders of Patricia Mounds and Melinda Lepre, as well as the attempted murders of Hilda Nelson and Lena McLean. And in 1985, despite overwhelming evidence, Little had received a paltry 4-year sentence for the rape and attempted murder of Lori Barris and Tanya Jackson, a decision that allowed him to continue his reign of terror. As Mitzi Roberts aptly put it, he had such a hatred for women, and he was just preying on the weakest women, what society would consider throwaway women. Tragically, it was this societal dismissal of these victims as lesser that allowed Sam Little to evade justice for so long. Little operated in the shadows. He had no credit cards, conducted no bank transactions, and even the registration of his vehicle was murky. These factors made it nearly impossible for Mitzi to trace his movements with precision. For months, Mitzi tirelessly worked the phones, reaching out to police departments across the nation. She focused on places where Little was known to frequent, urging local authorities to stay vigilant. Meanwhile, she combed through National Crime Information Center records, searching for any recent encounters between Little and beat cops. As it turned out, Little was stopped and questioned frequently, often multiple times a week. Yet each time Mitzi followed a lead, she learned he had just left the area. "We were always 2 days behind him," she later lamented. Mitzi resisted pressure from her superiors to issue a public warrant or plaster posters with Little's face. She feared such measures would send him underground permanently, making him even harder to apprehend. Instead, Mitzi chose patience, holding out for a break in the case. That break finally came on September 3, 2012. A Louisiana detective happened upon Sam Little outside a homeless shelter near Lake Charles, surrounded by prostitutes and caught with a crack pipe in his possession. Running his name through the system yielded an invaluable lead. On September 5, Mitzi contacted the detective, who returned to the shelter to apprehend Little. But, true to form, Little had already vanished, leaving behind yet another frustrating near miss. It felt like déjà vu. Always 2 days behind, always one step too late. This time, Mitzi uncovered a crucial clue. Sam had been using a Walmart card for purchases. Acting quickly, she contacted Walmart customer service, leveraging Sam's social security number and date of birth to gain access to his account activity. Armed with the necessary details, Mitzi traced Sam's recent transactions. They revealed multiple purchases at a liquor store near the Wayfair homeless shelter in Louisville. Mitzi immediately alerted the U.S. Marshals. Within 2 hours, they called her back with the news she'd been waiting for. Sam Little was finally in custody. To avoid tipping their hand, the Marshals apprehended Sam under the guise of a drug warrant, concealing that he was the primary suspect in 2 brutal murders. Sam's failure to attend a court-mandated drug program in Los Angeles months earlier provided just enough leverage to detain him while Mitzi finalized her case and presented it to the district attorney. Without delay, Sam Little was extradited back to California, where justice finally began to close in. Detective Mitzi Roberts teamed up with veteran detective Rick Jackson, embarking on a nationwide effort to build an airtight case against Sam Little. The pair sought out survivors like Hilda Nelson and Lila McCain, who had narrowly escaped Little's clutches in Pascagoula in 1980 and 1981. They also contacted Lori Barrows, whose decision to play dead in San Diego in 1984 had saved her life. Remarkably, all 3 women agreed to travel to Los Angeles, determined to testify against the man who had tried to end their lives. Though they were unable to locate Tanya Jackson, another 1984 survivor, Mitzi enlisted 2 critical witnesses, San Diego officers Louis Tamagni and Wayne Speece, who had interrupted Little mid-attack that fateful night. Adding to the mounting evidence, a 3rd DNA match connected Sam Little to the murder of Carol Alford, whose body had been abandoned in a Los Angeles alleyway in 1987. With this definitive link, the district attorney filed 3 charges of murder against him. From his prison cell, Little adamantly proclaimed his innocence. The witnesses were flown in to testify at the trial. While the former San Diego police officers were accommodated at the relatively comfortable DoubleTree Hotel, Lori Barrows, Hilda Nelson, and Lila McClain were relegated to a dilapidated motel in a rough neighborhood, the kind frequented by sex workers and drug addicts. An incensed Lila McClain remarked, "I haven't done this in years, and I've never felt more like a whore." When Mitzi Roberts heard about the deplorable accommodations, she wasted no time confronting Deputy DA Gary Hernsberger. "You're making my victim stay at the damn Coata," she snapped. "This is unacceptable." Taken aback, Hernsberg swiftly apologized and arranged for the women to be relocated to the DoubleTree Hotel. On August 18, 2014, the trial of Samuel Little commenced. Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman delivered a masterful prosecution. She meticulously demonstrated the chilling similarities between the 3 murders and broke down the complexities of DNA profiling with both clarity and flair. On the stand, when asked to identify her attacker, Lila McClain confidently pointed to Sam Little and quipped, "Yeah, it's the man over there, only he's uglier now." As Lori Barrows approached the stand to recount her horrific ordeal, the sight of her attacker sitting mere feet away overwhelmed her. She collapsed, hyperventilating, Detective Mitzi Roberts rushed to her aid, helping her to her feet and guiding her to the stand. Despite the emotional toll, Barris delivered a powerful and detailed account of her abduction, sexual assault, and near-death experience at the hands of Samuel Little, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Hilda Nelson also testified with precision, vividly recounting the harrowing moment her life was saved by a friend's timely knock at the door as Sam Little was choking the life out of her. While the survivors relived their trauma on the stand, Sam sat back, occasionally sneering or suppressing a smirk, his cold indifference chilling the courtroom. Former San Diego police officers Tamagni and Spees recounted their involvement in the attempted murder case of Tanya Jackson. They expressed deep frustration over the justice system's failure to convict Sam Little back in 1985, despite their exhaustive efforts to build a solid case for the sexual assault and attempted murder of both Jackson and Barris. Instead, Little served a mere 2 years for assault charges, only to be released and claim the lives of 3 more women shortly afterward. Unbeknownst to them at the time, as they testified in 2014, Sam Little's true body count far exceeded the 3 women they knew of. Shockingly, at least 35 more women had fallen victim to his violence following his release in 1987. On August 24, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict. Samuel Little was found guilty of the murders of Carol Alford, Audrey Nelson, and Guadalupe Apodaca. At Little's sentencing on September 25th, bereaved families gave heart-wrenching impact statements. Audrey Nelson's daughter Pearl shared her devastating loss. "I was 13 when the police showed up. That day I found out my mom had been murdered, and no one knew who did this. She had been getting her life together, preparing to reunite with me. She loved me, and I loved her, and this long-awaited reunion was stolen from me. All I ever wanted was my mom. Instead of saying hello and hugging her, I had to say goodbye. I'll never forget the moment I placed a rose at her burial. I'd never buried anyone before, let alone my own mother. I waited for her, and she never came home." At Little's sentencing on September 25th, bereaved families gave heart-wrenching impact statements. Audrey Nelson's daughter Pearl shared her devastating loss. "I was 13 when the police showed up. That day I found out my mom had been murdered, and no one knew who did this. She had been getting her life together, preparing to reunite with me. She loved me, and I loved her, and this long-awaited reunion was stolen from me. All I ever wanted was my mom. Instead of saying hello and hugging her, had to say goodbye. I'll never forget the moment I placed a rose at her burial. I'd never buried anyone before, let alone my own mother. I waited for her, and she never came home." There was something strangely familiar about her face, but after the emotional impact statements, Sam Little stood to address the court. "This conviction is built on lies, and liars coached by liars," he declared defiantly. "I hope that in a new trial, if I get one, the overlooked and withheld evidence will finally be addressed by my attorneys in a fair trial. Labeling me a serial killer without proof is an illegal lynching. Speculation is not proof." Samuel Little received 3 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would never be eligible for parole. Sam Little was incarcerated in California State Prison in Los Angeles County. For years, he staunchly claimed innocence in the murders of Audrey Nelson and Guadalupe Apodaca. However, on May 17, 2018, Texas Ranger James B. Holland visited him to discuss the 1994 murder of Denise Christie Brothers in Odessa, Texas. Brothers' body had been discovered discarded in a trash-filled vacant lot. Denise's boyfriend, Elton, had spent 3 hours using heroin with a man whose description closely resembled Sam Little, including the car he drove. The manner of Denise's death, strangulation, and her body dumped carelessly, was consistent with Little's established pattern of crimes. At the time, Little had been in his late 40s, roaming the country and leaving a trail of victims behind. Texas Ranger James B. Holland, known for his unmatched skill in securing confessions from the most hardened criminals, took on the challenge of cracking Sam Little. Holland's reputation for gaining the trust of unrepentant psychopaths made him the ideal choice for this daunting task. Holland arrived with a strategic card to play, a promise from the district attorney's office in Eckert County, Texas, that the death penalty would be off the table for the murder of Denise Brothers, provided Little cooperated. By this point, Sam was a shadow of his former self, wheelchair-bound, diabetic, and grappling with a failing heart, clearly nearing the end of his life. As the interview began, Sam defaulted to his well-worn denial, declaring for what felt like the billionth time, "I didn't do those things they say I did." Holland, unimpressed, replied with deliberate nonchalance, "Sure, yeah, I know all about that. I know all about you. I've been studying you. And you know what? I admire you. I think they got you all wrong calling you a rapist. You're not a rapist, and I can prove it." Sam leaned into the bait, insisting, "I didn't rape nobody. I never hit a woman with a closed fist in my life. I didn't hurt them." Holland nodded as though they were old friends, replying smoothly, "Nah, you didn't need to do that. You never did that. You don't need to take nothing from no one." Holland suddenly shifted gears, tossing out a casual question meant to catch Sam off guard. "Let me ask you something. How do you like it in here?" Sam snorted derisively. "Here? I fucking hate it here. I've got a code on my jacket that I never even got arrested for. I should be a level 3 and I'm a level 4, and I never did them things." The things he referred to, of course, were the murders. Holland leaned in, his tone now soothing but deliberate. "Now, there. I can help. But you're the captain of the boat, the pilot of the plane. I want to hear about your life because this is what I do. And you're important. I'll tell you what I can do. If you tell me about a Texas case, I'll take it to a grand jury. If the facts check out and you're indicted, I can get you out of here. I'll fly out there on a special plane. It's a really cool plane. I'll pick you up and you'll go with me to Texas. But for that to happen, I'd appreciate it if you'd tell me the truth." Sam sat in silence, the room heavy with the pause. Then, as if to deflect the pressure, he pivoted to a familiar gripe. "LAPD, Sam, I'm a rapist. It was all over the TV. What is her fucking name? I can't even remember. The lying whore detective." Holland responded coolly, "Mitzi Roberts?" Sam sneered, "Yeah, she's a fucking cunt. You get the record straight right now." Holland chuckled lightly. "What'd you call her again?" Then, in a deliberate tone, he added, "People who don't know me call me James. People who know me call me Jim. My mom calls me Jimmy." Sam decided to poke at the calm exterior. "I'll call you Jimmy." Without missing a beat, Holland shot back, "Okay, I'll call you Sammy." Sam's face darkened, his voice sharp. "No one calls me Sammy." Holland quipped, "Well, no man calls me Jimmy." The exchange broke the tension, and Sam erupted in laughter, a crack in his otherwise stoic demeanor. It was in that moment, amidst the laughter, that he finally began to confess to the 1994 murder of Denise Christie Brothers. His confessions didn't stop there. He hinted at a far more extensive trail of death. In October 2017, journalist and author Gillian Loren sat down with Mitzi Roberts to discuss the infamous Black Dahlia cold case, which Mitzi had worked on from 2010 to 2013. During their conversation, Mitzi brought up Sam Little's name, piquing Gillian's interest. Soon after, she decided to reach out to Sam through a letter. To her surprise, Sam replied. What began as casual correspondence quickly evolved into a lengthy exchange that eventually led to Gillian visiting Sam in California State Prison in August 2018, just months after his confession to Denise Brothers' murder. At first, Sam played innocent, feeding Gillian fabricated stories and even demanding she buy him a TV. But when Gillian firmly refused to entertain his lies, Sam admitted to the 1970 murder of Mary Jo Brosley, his first. He went on to nonchalantly claim he'd killed around 86 women since then. Looking Gillian in the eye, he said, "I've only ever told this to one other person in my life, Texas Ranger Jimmy Holland. You and him. You're my only friends." On September 23, 2018, Sam Little was flown to Texas and placed in the Wise County Detention Center to await trial. It was here that the floodgates opened. Over the next 2 months, October and November, Little confessed to an astonishing 93 murders during his conversations with Texas Ranger James Holland. Holland, now officially named chief investigator of the Little cases, wasted no time. He reached out to law enforcement agencies across the country, alerting them that the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history was finally talking. Law enforcement agencies across the U.S. began combing through their cold cases, hoping to match Sam Little's confessions with unsolved murders that fit his distinct M.O. Soon, detectives were flying into Texas, eager to speak to the man who held the answers to decades-old mysteries. Little, meanwhile, was indulged with surprising luxuries: joy rides around Decatur, Texas, McDonald's pancakes and milkshakes, all to keep him cooperative. His astonishingly accurate sketches of victims, often drawn from memory in his jail cell, became a crucial tool for identifying many of the women he had murdered. Chili and Lauren, now a central part of Sam's life, frequently traveled to Texas during this time. Little had taken to calling Lauren his angel, and her presence served multiple purposes: gleaning information the police couldn't, gathering material for her book, and, perhaps most importantly, keeping Sam content and cooperative. To maintain his favor, Lauren adopted a disarming approach, donning fishnet stockings to appeal to his warped preferences, speaking in soft, soothing tones, and even singing lullabies, all while concealing her inner revulsion. On November 27, 2018, the FBI announced that 34 of Sam Little's 93 confessions had been quickly confirmed as accurate, based on details he himself provided. On December 13, 2018, he pled guilty to the murder of Denise Brothers, earning him a 4th life sentence. Following this, Little expressed a sudden desire to return to California State Prison in Los Angeles County, despite his earlier insistence that he despised the place. The real reason? It was closer to Chili and Lauren. Their daily phone calls and Lauren's frequent visits kept Little tethered, both emotionally and strategically, even as she struggled to endure these interactions. Sam began telling Lauren disturbing things like, "I'm not able to fuck you, but you're mine and you'll be mine forever in heaven." It became evident that the twisted sense of love Sam claimed to feel for his victims as he choked and claimed them had now fixated on Lauren. Chillingly, had Little been a free man, he almost certainly would have tried to kill her. Despite the unnerving circumstances, Chili and Lauren continued their interviews, driven by their mission to identify the countless victims who remain nameless. For 2 years and 4 months, Lauren endured near daily contact with one of the most prolific killers in history, an experience that inevitably took a devastating toll on her mental health. And honestly, how could it not? Remarkably, it was through the relentless efforts of Chili and Lauren that authorities were able to identify victims such as Agatha White Buffalo and Alice Duval. Lauren's conversations with Sam yielded key insights, allowing investigators to piece together fragments of his personal life and details about a vast number of women. Across the country, law enforcement agencies continued their painstaking work to connect Sam Little to unsolved murders, aided by the critical information Lauren had managed to extract. On May 31, 2019, Sam Little pleaded guilty to 2 murders in Cleveland, Ohio, those of Mary Jo Payton and Rose Evans, and was handed 2 additional life sentences. Not long after, he admitted to the murders of Annie Lee Stewart and an unidentified black woman whose body had been found discarded near a cigarette billboard in Cincinnati. These confessions earned him his 7th and 8th life sentences, further cementing his grim legacy. By October 6, 2019, the FBI announced they had verified 50 of Sam Little's 93 confessions. The effort to confirm his claims became a race against time as Little's health continued to decline. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 only added hurdles, with California State Prison going into lockdown preventing investigators from showing him photos of potential victims. Extracting details over phone calls from a manipulative psychopath was no easy task. Still, in November 2020, Miami-Dade police confirmed Little's involvement in the murders of Karen O'Donoghue and Dorothy Gibson from the 1970s. Gibson's case carried an additional tragedy. An innocent man had been wrongfully convicted of her murder in 1977, spending 22 years behind bars before being exonerated in 1999. On December 21, 2020, Sam Little contracted COVID-19 and was moved into the prison's makeshift quarantine unit. Just over a week later, on December 30, at approximately 4:35 a.m., he succumbed to complications from the virus, exacerbated by his chronic heart condition. The most prolific serial killer in U.S. history reached the age of 80 before his death. That morning, Jillian Loren was awakened by a call. To her shock, Sam Little had named her as his next of kin. The clerk on the other end unironically stated, "I'm sorry for your loss." Little left Jillian $1,097 and the responsibility of attending to his remains. Jillian arranged for Little's brain to be studied by neuroscientists at Stanford and UC Irvine, hoping to uncover any unique characteristics in the brain structure of a psychopathic serial killer. However, a paperwork mishap led to his immediate cremation. While it was a missed opportunity, prior studies of serial killers' brains suggest that, chillingly, their structure often mirrors that of ordinary individuals. In 2021, Jillian Loren finally retrieved Sam Little's ashes from California State Prison. The remains now rest on a shelf in her garage. Loren recalled one of her final conversations with Little, where he claimed, "I'm sorry and ashamed about the deaths of these women." Skeptical, she pushed him, suggesting it was all just an act. Little admitted, "Yeah, you got me. I put on a show for the world, the public. They're strangers. They don't really know me. All I can do is pray for my soul. God says that murdering is no more serious than stealing a candy bar."